The game Ethereal World dropped 10 years ago as a dating sim, but way more dudes played it than anyone else. You could play all kinds of characters, from simple but effective ones to super complicated and weak ones. One of them was this useless character, famous for how hard he was to play and his ugly as hell face. And then there was this weirdo, Henry Wilson, who played that character for 10 straight years. One day, the forum blew up with posts about a dark dragon and players losing their data. A final boss in a dating sim? That's wild. Henry figured these games usually ended when you hooked up with someone. A top-ranking player claimed this boss was unbeatable since it had almost total magic resistance and a ton of buffs. Like, how does it even make sense for a monster in a magic world to just nullify magic? Seeing posts about people losing their characters, Henry logged in, and boom, the dark demonic dragon was right there. So, here's the backstory. In Ethereal World, there's this cult group called Dark Demonic People. Their whole deal is helping another world called the Gate of Personality take over this one. And when they finally pulled it off, the dark demonic dragon showed up. Now 90% of the continent is under Gate of Personality control. Henry was always into PvP, not the storyline, but now everything's a mess. Well, he can't duck out of fighting this thing. Might as well try. So the guy decided to throw down with the demonic dragon. Henry's about to show off skills he's been grinding for the last 10 years. He gets to the battlefield. Time to talk about his character. He's the only character in the game who can't use magic like everyone else can use magic. Because of that, even the most hardcore players avoid him. He's basically worse than a noob. Sure, Henry can use a little magic, actually just one spell. It's a blink spell he's spamming right now. Henry Wilson's blink lets him randomly teleport 3 to 10 meters in any direction. The direction's random, so if he messes up the range, he can just die instantly from impact. On top of that, the cooldown and mana cost are a joke. Plus, there's a 2-second stun penalty after using it. So yeah, anyone can learn it, but no one really does. But Henry Wilson? Dude mastered blinking. He can control the direction, distance, and even cancel the penalty. And it doesn't even cost mana since he doesn't have a mana stat. Unlike other spells, blinking is just a movement ability. But our boy got obsessed with this character since everything relied on pure skill. So for 10 years, Henry's been playing the only character in the game that doesn't use magic in fights. And just like that, he lands the killing blow on the dragon, taking out the final boss. Even Henry can't believe he actually pulled it off. He knows he's decked out in ancient relics, but his character is still trash. Whatever, it's a vibe. Time to flex on the community about killing the dark demonic dragon. But then, bam, tons of red notifications. Because he got the wrong ending, 90% of the world got destroyed. Turns out Henry was the closest anyone's ever been to the true ending. The system tells him to hit that true ending, and suddenly he's getting isekai'd into the game. Henry wakes up in some building, lying on the floor. He gets up and looks around, trying to figure out where he is. When he checks a mirror, he sees the face of his character, Henry Wilson. The first episode, Escape the Pursuers, kicks off. This is the tutorial quest for our hero. He pulls an admission certificate to Stella Academy out of his pocket. Hard to believe, but yeah, this is totally the game world and Henry is his character. Time to think. That voice told him to reach the true ending. But as far as Henry knows, this game doesn't even have a true ending, just a bunch of endings. Then it hits him. No one's hit the true ending in the last 10 years. Crap, no time to think about that now. Henry runs to the window. If he remembers right after the character wakes up, some dudes chasing him break into the cabin. Damn, they're already here. Henry quickly hides by the window frame. The pursuers spot his cabin through the thick forest. The squad leader orders them to search the place. There's only so long Henry can dodge them. Fighting isn't an option either. No clue what to do. Suddenly, the system tells him he can use the blink skill. Blinking forward, the spell Henry's been grinding his whole life. With a body cursed by magic leakage syndrome, a character who can't store mana has only one hope. Back to reality. Blink has a max range of 9 meters and a 3-second cooldown. The system's probably telling Henry to blink right now. But that was in the game, where he controlled the character with a mouse and keyboard. No time to think. The pursuers are closing in. All he can do now is try. Henry bolts out of the cabin and the mob starts chasing him. The first part of the tutorial, escape the pursuers using blink. These guys have magic boots and are faster than Henry, so the only way to get away is by blinking. Henry reminds himself he's blinked 1,000,000 times. The timing is burned into his muscle memory. The pursuers are yelling at him to stop and they're almost on him. The big downside of blinking is that if the user can't control the range, they might crash into something and die instantly. One of the pursuers swings his sword, ready to send Henry straight to hell. But with blink, it's a whole different story. Henry successfully teleports, putting a big gap between him and the mob. The leader tells his guys not to lose heart since blink stuns the user for 2 seconds after. But then they see Henry still moving. Henry's got to stay sharp and use the uneven terrain to his advantage. Players who can't nail blinking at this stage won't make it to the next episode. Actually, 99% of players who picked Henry Wilson couldn't even clear the tutorial. And even the 1% who did couldn't master blink distance control or continuous blinking. Seeing Henry blinking all over the terrain, the leader tells the mages to move up. They're gonna hit him with ranged attacks. The second part of the tutorial, use blink to dodge magic arrows. In the game, you could see everything happening behind you because it was on a monitor, so dodging was doable. Now Henry's relying on his derived skills like magic leakage syndrome, sixth sense, and cognitive acceleration. Using those, he successfully dodges the arrows. At the same time, he blinks forward, dodging a powerful magic attack by a hair. If it had hit, he'd be dead. That was close. Now for the last part of the tutorial, crossing a canyon using blink. The only way to make it is by perfectly controlling the skill. After that, Henry will run into some passing mages and escape. Then the tutorial's over. To clear this part, Henry has to cancel blink within 0.1 seconds at the perfect moment. One mistake and he's dead. The canyon's got about 20 floating boulders. But yeah, 0.1 seconds is way easier said than done. Whoever designed this tutorial is a sadist, but honestly, it's doable. The problem is the pursuers are closer than Henry expected. He's about 100 meters ahead of them. Since blink lasts 3 seconds, that's not enough time to cross the canyon. Looks like the best way to survive is to kill all the pursuers. Even Henry thinks that's nuts. How's he supposed to pull that off when he's never been in a real fight? In the game, the system would have made it impossible to attack the pursuers. But now this is real life. No rule says he has to blindly follow the game system. The thought of killing someone doesn't bother Henry. And it's not like these guys are his parents' killers, as per the story. He just figures he can take them, so now the hero's ready for a fight. The pursuers catch up and surround Henry. The leader thinks Henry's an idiot for wanting to fight them alone. With 8.7 meters between them, Henry blinks and vanishes. Less than a second later, he's stabbing a knife into one of the pursuers' chests. Henry feels the blood dripping from his fingers. He doesn't feel guilty at all. After all, he killed them just to survive. Leaving the body, Henry takes off running again. He took out one of them, but the next attack's gonna be tough. Henry's trying to figure out his next move. But he doesn't get why it's so quiet, like they've stopped chasing him. Nope, they've outflanked him, waiting on the other side of a rock. They start using magic again, and dodging it all is going to be hard, and their fire spell is insanely strong. Then Henry spots a branch sticking out of a rock up ahead. Using blink, he grabs it and avoids the fire strike. The pursuers thought they had him, calling him cocky for acting so bold. But when they looked, Henry wasn't in the ravine. He was already behind them. One of Blink's quirks is that it keeps the same momentum before and after use. Henry took out another pursuer with it. Now there are only 2 left. These guys clearly didn't expect this from some noob-looking dude. Henry needs to finish them off before the other 2 catch up. The pursuers note how insane Henry's reaction time is for a mage. Henry's reaction time is faster than most pro gamers, but that's only in games. He can't dodge attacks forever, especially this close. He's gotta end it quick. The pursuers mock him, saying they've figured out his fighting style. All he's got is blink and a knife. One guy decides as long as he guards his face and neck, the knife won't even scratch him. He casts an ice wave, hoping to see Henry's face twist in pain. But Henry blinks forward and slashes the guy's throat. The last guy says Henry used to run like a rat that had never fought before. Henry just smirks and thanks him for helping him get better. The guy, furious, draws his sword, ready to kill. Henry gets a bit closer and throws a spear at him. Using blink and a head-on attack risks a counter. The guy thinks Henry's trying to bait him into defense, throwing the spear and then aiming for his side. But he's not falling for it and deflects the spear with his sword. Now all he has to do is strike Henry while he's close. But turning around, Henry's already gone. Turns out Henry planned to attack from the front all along. The first episode's over. Henry's promised a bonus reward for a unique storyline playthrough. Now he's 100% sure this isn't a dream. His first blink, first fight, and first kill. It's all real. He killed to survive. Henry gets up and decides to leave, but he goes back to the bodies. Even though it leaves a bad taste, he's got to be practical. He's broke. He finds about 2 million credits in their pockets. That's like 2 million won. Better than nothing. Now the problem is crossing that canyon. But suddenly Henry hears a voice asking if anyone's there. Looks like it's the group of mages from the tutorial. Henry yells back. The mages ask if he can get across since there's no bridge nearby. Henry replies he's already on his way, so they decide to wait. But to cross that gap, a guy's got to be at least a third-class knight. Then they see Henry hopping from rock to rock like a pro. It's a crazy sight, and most of them assume it's some kind of jump magic. But a blue-haired girl confidently says it's blink. Except Blink doesn't let you control direction or distance, so how's that even possible? Behind Henry, on the other side of the canyon, two people are standing. The mages think they're with him, but their thoughts change when those two start attacking Henry. Seeing this, Henry quickly blinks to another rock. Looks like these two were with the hired assassins. This is bad. Blink's cooldown is 3 seconds. He can't dodge all this magic with it. Henry's got to find the next floating rock to land on. But it's not easy. The two are still attacking. Because of that, Henry slips and is about to fall. All the floating rocks are too far away. He blinks, hoping to land on one. Henry survives by grabbing onto a rock. But now he's about to get blasted by fire, and there's no escape. At that moment, the fire gets countered by ice magic. Henry's shocked. It's an ice spear covered in lightning. Someone just dual cast attributes during the tutorial, and the caster nailed the trajectory without wasting a drop of mana. It was that blue-haired mage girl. The assassins freak out and run away in fear. Henry breathes a sigh of relief. It looks like he's gonna live. He finally crosses the canyon and thanks the girl for her help. She coldly says she didn't do it for thanks, so he can forget about it. She's got the prettiest voice Henry's ever heard, but she's tough to talk to. Anyway, even though these guys are known as bandits who raid nearby villages, most of that stuff's actually the dark demon cult's doing. But that's the end of it. Once Henry escapes the canyon, he'll be on mage territory, and the dark demons won't chase him anymore. Not to mention, they don't even know who he is. Another system notification pops up. The second episode begins. Doesn't seem like it'll be hard. But when Henry sees that he has to enroll in Stella Academy, he's floored. He's got to do school all over again at his age. The hero and the other mages set off on a wagon. Images started flashing in his head. Him telling his mom he wanted to become a mage when he grew up, and her believing in him. Little Henry held a second-hand magical message his parents had worked hard to buy for him. The boy was determined to study hard and not disappoint his parents. But one day, the doctor told his mom that her son had mana leakage syndrome. Little Henry couldn't believe it. The hero couldn't tell if these were his memories or the characters. Henry opened his eyes and snapped back to reality. Morning had already arrived. They were about to wake him up since they'd soon be arriving in Lezoicha, the satellite city of Arcanium. The wagon came to a stop and the group decided to take a break. Henry noticed that blue-haired girl staring at him intently, but she quickly turned away and walked off. Harsh, but honestly, things were going okay considering how nervous the hero was. He was relieved the timeline was closer to modern times and not the medieval era. Magic exists in the ethereal world, but safe cities have trains, airships, and portals to make long-distance travel convenient. Right now, Henry and the mages were heading to Lezoicha to board an airship. Lezoicha was on the way to Arcanium, the city of magic, where the real story begins. It has legendary magical towers, knightly mage orders, and 5 famous academies. The academy with the most powerful mages and the most outstanding students is Stella Academy. Because of this, Stella is full of geniuses and nobles from all over the world. The hero still couldn't figure out how his character managed to get in. Then he remembered he hadn't checked his skills yet. Mana leakage syndrome boosts strength, agility, and sensitivity. Sixth sense detects mana within a 12-meter radius, and detection acceleration activates in case of danger. Henry would have been dead by now if it weren't for these 2 skills. The only downside is that his body prevents him from storing mana. It's like a built-in curse his character has. However, it allows him to sense the mana around him. It also lets him sense incoming attacks, even if he's not looking in that direction. Detection acceleration lets him perceive everything like time is slowing down if a threat or attack is coming at superhuman speed. It's a must-have skill for Henry since he can't use mana. But even Sixth Sense can't be used for long. It drains a lot of mental strength and has serious side effects afterward. The hero's starting stats aren't bad. The original character had super low sensitivity, but it looks like the hero took some of those stats and reallocated them. In the ethereal world, there isn't just one level. Every stat has its own. Skills are measured in levels and stats are rated by stars. The max level is 9 stars, but it's nearly impossible to reach. Henry played this game for over 10 years and only got his endurance and sensitivity up to 8 stars. Right now, he needed to invest in sensitivity to level up his sixth sense and reaction speed. Endurance and flexibility could be improved in other ways. The current issue was mana leakage syndrome. If the hero didn't work on it, he wouldn't last long. He needed to upgrade it to Secrets of Natural Physique as soon as possible. The method to enhance mana leakage syndrome was in Stella Academy. That meant Henry had no choice but to enroll there if he wanted to stop the apocalypse and cure his syndrome. Man, the hero didn't want to leave anymore. He wished he had something to help with this. Henry noticed he'd missed some notifications, but there was no time to check. He'd look later. The airship was heading to Arcanium, A group of kids noticed the hero looking around like a lost little puppy, as if he'd never been on an airship before. The leader of the group loudly said he didn't understand why Stella would let peasants in. He claimed it was the most prestigious place in the world, and they were polluting it with commoners. Henry just sighed, thinking kids were the same everywhere, and walked away. The guy was pissed off at being ignored, but his shouting was interrupted by the noise around them. That's when the princess of the Adalebit kingdom, Monica Biles Adalebit, walked into the room. The guy immediately straightened up, placed a hand on his chest, and addressed the princess. She just gave him a cold, disdainful look and walked on. Monica walked past Henry, too. There she was, the villainess of this world. Monica Biles is one of the main characters of the game. She and the main female protagonist are always at odds. In the end, she dies no matter what route you take. In some endings, she's killed brutally. In others, the Academy torments her before she gets expelled. In one, she experiences something so humiliating she never shows her face in public again. It's like the devs had a personal vendetta and wanted Monica to suffer no matter what. Henry had heard she was pretty popular among male players. She was definitely cute. The hero's stomach growled. It was time to grab some food. The cafeteria had shelves of beautiful, probably delicious food, but everything was way too expensive. Henry decided he'd eat once he got to Arcanium. Suddenly, an announcement came on. The airship would arrive in Arcanium in 10 minutes, and everyone was asked to gather on the first floor. Is it really about to begin? Either way, this was Henry's reality now, and it was time to take action. The hero's glad he got through the training, but he's not sure if he can actually survive at Stella Academy. Actually, scratch that. He's not even sure if he can survive in this world at all. He wishes there was something that could help in this kind of situation. Then Henry remembered the notifications he missed. The system's offering him a special reward, updated versions of in-game items, upgraded skills, and some XP. The hero asked if he could use Returning Light or Flash Praise. But after running a search, the item rating was too high, so it'd be significantly nerfed. As for Hyperspace Blink, the system revealed it's an upgraded version of Blink and can't be acquired. Since Henry doesn't have the ability to narrate, the system can't fully activate. The force driving the story forward is called narrative power. If the hero keeps exploring unknown branches of the story, like yesterday, it'll build up. Long story short, they're not giving him late-game items because he's still too much of a newbie. Henry asked about the bulbul glasses. The system checked and confirmed it's possible, so the hero decided to go for it. He never thought he'd actually end up wearing this thing one day. The bulbul glasses store all the info Henry gathered while playing the game. In the Ether world, it's impossible to remember or access info about hunted monsters or acquired knowledge. So players created all sorts of items to store info their own way, and Henry did the same. The glasses memorize everything he's seen. From the special features, the hero opens the bulbul folder. Inside are alchemy materials, hunting grounds, dungeons, and monsters. All right, that's enough, since this is actual real life. Henry can't say how well he'll perform using the game system, but with these glasses, he can recover at least half the abilities he used to have. Suddenly, the people around him started talking about a girl named Isel, the one with blue hair, who turned out to be the eldest daughter of the traitor Dutch Malf. The students were gossiping about how she dared to show up here. From what Henry gets, one of the glasses' features lets him register or check info about characters in the story. Isel Malf, the fake heroine, the Ice Lightning Mage, eldest daughter of the Malf Duchy. Her father's death led to her family's downfall, and she'll die later. To explain Isel, the fake heroine, Henry has to point something out. Even though he's in a game called Ether World, the thing is, this game is based on an original fantasy novel called Don't Love the Princess. And that novel is about Isel, who lost her entire family. She grows up facing the schemes of the villainous Monica Biles and eventually ends up with the male protagonist. Her revenge plan completely fades away and the male protagonists protect her. The novel has a tragic ending and readers gave it harsh reviews. But the problem is that even though the game world is based on the novel, the storyline is totally different. The game introduced an original character named Flame who took over the role of the main heroine. On top of that, Flame has a backstory. She's a woman living an ordinary life in the modern world who enjoyed reading Don't Love the Princess and got transported into this world. So unlike the novel, Isel became the fake heroine in the game while Flame became the real heroine. Despite countless attempts and efforts by many players, it's said that Isel couldn't survive any of the routes. As a result, Isel got pushed out of the main heroine role. Well, that's not Henry's problem. But he felt like he'd seen this girl somewhere before. He chalked it up to his imagination and decided to focus on preparing for enrollment. At Stella Academy, all the students lined up in the courtyard, listening to a professor's speech. As the students already know, Dark demonic people are mages who mastered otherworldly powers and turned into monsters. Even now, the dark demonic people continue their invasion. It's the students' destiny as mages to protect the world from the forces of darkness. Some guys chuckled that the semester couldn't start without a boring speech. Next, the Stella leadership would hold an oath ceremony with 4 high-scoring students and the freshman representative. The students were asked to step up to the podium. Everyone's faces were glowing, matching their status as main characters. But the brightest among them was clearly the freshman representative, Mitch Stewart. He's the student with the highest score and insanely good looks. This is the famous Mitch Stewart. He's the kind of character who fits the phrase, the chosen one above all others. With a mana status of 9 stars, he has potential close to divine levels. He's a natural genius who can wield all the elements in this world. Even if Henry can't reach the true ending, he needs to at least avoid bad endings by getting Mitch on the right side. But that depends entirely on Flame and her behavior from here on out. Since she's from the same reality as the hero, maybe it wouldn't hurt to get along with her. But things will get tricky if she sees Henry as an enemy and shuts him out. Since he has the upper hand when it comes to information, he can't take any risks. Flame writes fantasy romance novels, while Henry creates fantasy romance games. Still, his importance in this game isn't even on the same level as a village shop NPC. What's more, the heroine has a special ability to cleanse dark, demonic people. But on top of that, she even has an ability that drains the wealth of those around her. Being near her will definitely affect Henry. His role is to support the main characters from a distance and, if possible, stay out of their way. With that, the entrance ceremony ends and the episode Enroll in Stella Academy wraps up to loud applause. It's been a while since Henry finished university, so it feels weird to be a high schooler again. But honestly, it's kind of nice. Having this little thing makes it even better. It's a watch that proves you're a student at Stella, the most prestigious magic academy. If you've got this watch, you'll get way better treatment and perks than most people with a Magic Warrior's license. Henry wants to hurry up and show it off and maybe go out for a stroll. Suddenly, a strict professor walked in and told everyone to take their seats. The students were about to start an exam, so they were told to clear everything off their desks except writing tools. Anyone wearing glasses would need to get them checked first. It's kind of wild to have an exam right after the entrance ceremony. The curriculum at Stella is way more intense than most Korean universities. They make you take a test on your very first day. The placement exam is used to sort students into classes. The professor yelled for everyone to get started. Looking at the paper, Henry had no clue what it said. The placement test had nothing to do with the entrance exam, which was already known for being insanely hard. Based on the results, students are placed in classes F through A, with S being the top tier. Obviously, most of the game's main characters end up in Class S. Henry figured since he got in, he could just leave the paper blank. After all, being ranked 1,141st out of 1,141 students pretty much guaranteed he'd be in Class F. He glanced at Mitch. That guy looked exactly the same as he did in the game. Mitch had already finished the exam. No surprise. Life must be boring for him. Boredom was Mitch Stewart's defining trait. Born into the most powerful family in the world with the most genius mind and talent ever, everything was just too easy for him. That's why Mitch's alignment, whether he turned out good or evil, depended entirely on how the main heroine behaved. Dark demonic beings who corrupt humans were obviously super interested in this guy. His biggest issue, though, was his family. Anyway, watching geniuses like that just made Henry feel even more average. Then it hit him. Maybe he should try using the bulbul glasses. He'd used them a lot in the game to gain bonus skills while studying in the library. Henry had nothing to lose, so why not give it a shot? And that's when the professor mentioned glasses again. The professor had clearly said that if anyone was using glasses, they needed to be checked first. The teacher took Henry's glasses and inspected them. Henry was freaking out. If they found magic on them, he'd get kicked out. Suddenly, the system said it had detected a missing part of the bulbul glasses and suggested naming it. Henry begged the system to stay quiet. After a thorough look, the professor didn't sense any magic coming from the glasses and told Henry to check with him next time. Henry took them back and sighed in relief. If the original features had been active, it would have been a huge problem. Time to start. When he put the glasses on, he could actually see the answers. What if he scored at the top? At this rate, he might not end up in Class F and could even make it into A. But barely a couple minutes later, the professor ended the exam and told everyone to turn in their papers. Henry was in shock. He'd only answered 3 questions. The teacher started looking over the exams and seemed surprised. Henry thought he wouldn't end up in Class F, but this felt like too much. Suddenly, the professor yelled for Henry to hand over the glasses immediately. The man took another look at them, saying this was impossible. He asked one of the students to bring Dr. Graham. It wasn't clear what had gotten into the professor. Henry had even written out the answer order clearly so he wouldn't be accused of cheating. Dr. Grahan, a professor of magical engineering, inspected the glasses carefully. The fact that Henry had solved a particular question was definitely raising eyebrows, but the doctor reassured the professor that Henry hadn't cheated. Grahan didn't detect any magical energy from the glasses or any other items Henry had. The doctor said Henry had definitely solved it with his own abilities. In any case, Grahan told Professor Mark Hillman to apologize to the student and make sure to teach him well. Mr. Hillman admitted to the misunderstanding and apologized to Henry. Honestly, though, Henry had cheated. It would have been a real disaster if the original features of the glasses were still working. He's just lucky he didn't get caught. In the staff room, the professor was still reviewing the exams. Professor Edeltaman from the Academy's council approached and asked if these were the placement exams for this year's freshmen. She'd heard that this year had an unusually interesting group of first years. Mr. Hillman confirmed it seemed that way. There was Monica Biles from the most famous fire magic family. Then Jeremy Scalvin, who outshone all his older brothers in the fight for the throne and was chosen as the crown prince of the Scalvin Empire. And the successor to the master of the world's greatest magical tower, Liam Stone. Professor Edeltaman noted it must have been tough to create test questions with so many elite students from well-known families taking the exam. This year definitely had some interesting questions. Mr. Hillman was glad she thought so. As Professor Edeltaman pointed out, this year's placement test had a new type of question. The first three were the kind that regular students would find nearly impossible to solve. The first question tested if students could quickly skip over an unsolvable problem and move on to the next. The second question was about solving a problem that wasn't in any textbooks. The age of magic that relied on rote memorization and theory was over. Now it was about quick judgment and creative thinking. But those questions were never meant to be solved. In fact, more than 1,000 of the 1,141 students left those questions blank. Of the remaining 100 who attempted them, most didn't get a single one right. Only 3 students answered all 3 questions correctly. Mitch Stewart, the prodigy of the century with a mysterious background. Then Flame, who got into the school on the principal's recommendation despite being a commoner. And lastly, our boy, Henry Wilson. Mitch and Flame were considered geniuses, but Mr. Hillman was certain Henry had the lowest admission score. The professor hadn't expected him to solve any of those questions, especially since he hadn't answered anything else. Professor Edeltaman was curious why he cared so much about this one student's score. He said some students' scores just didn't make sense, but Professor Edeltaman was sure they did. After all, no amount of formulas and equations could have solved those problems. But Hillman could without knowing anything. He asked if she thought the kid might be a genius. She said it could also just be a coincidence. Then she left, leaving him deep in thought. He opened Henry's file, which said he'd been granted special admission because his skill in blinking was highly respected. So the kid the principal had personally admitted wasn't like the others. A combat mage specializing in blinking. Soon enough, the professor would find out if this was a fluke or if Henry was truly special. The students had already heard that homework was posted on the bulletin board. Everyone was worried about what class they'd been placed in. Henry couldn't believe he'd have to check the class list in person. In the game, it only took one click. There was a crowd around the bulletin board. People were talking about how Henry got 0 points on the magic application section of the entrance test. They couldn't believe someone like him could get into Stella. Now they were questioning the Academy standards. No matter what they said, Henry just wanted to check his class and leave. But he froze when he didn't see his name under Class F. He hoped he hadn't flunked out for only answering 3 questions. Then he overheard people talking about some mistake. Uslek from the Marquisate of Czechbelen ranked 29th and made it into Class A. Even Kyle, who aced the theory section, got into Class A. But Henry outranked both of them. Henry didn't get it and moved closer to Czech. He was stunned to see his name under Class S. This couldn't be real. That's the most prestigious ranking every student dreams of. Class S is where Stella's most exceptional students gather. It's different from other classes, which have multiple groups. Class S only has one group of 41 students. Being placed there had to be a mistake. Henry was about to lose his mind. Now he'd be bumping into all the main characters more often. Interacting with them would only shorten his already limited lifespan, and switching classes wasn't an option. He'd just have to try his best to stay invisible. Well, he'd figure it out somehow. The fire magic professor, who also happens to be Monica's mom, Melanie Baker, slapped her daughter for getting 3 questions wrong. Mrs. Baker yelled that even Princess Isel from the fallen kingdom of Malf got 2 questions right. Monica couldn't answer questions that even bugs could, so that makes her worse than them. The girl should think of herself as a bug and do it again. Mrs. Baker told her daughter to listen. Monica can't let herself turn into someone like her mom, who got kicked out of the kingdom and clings to some dumb professor job. Monica can't be a disgrace to the kingdom. Her mom grabbed her and said she has to be better than her sister. The girl gets what her mom means, doesn't she? Monica nodded timidly and walked away. No, she doesn't get it. She's just living the way she was taught and solving problems the way she was taught. Problems made of magic she hasn't learned, spells and formulas she hasn't studied. Monica cries, not understanding why her mom tortures her. Meanwhile, Class S was getting ready for their lesson. Henry was thinking to himself that he'd totally screwed up. Of course, he ended up in a school full of antisocial weirdos. His classmates were talking about him, wondering how he even got there. Their parents had protested and asked why Henry was in Class S, and Mr. Hillman just said he had all the skills needed to be in it. Well, looks like our guy is an outcast. On the other hand, his classmates have been working hard since they were kids. So yeah, Henry would be annoyed too if a well-known idiot like him ended up in their class. Students' class rankings change based on their performance after every test, so it's not a big deal. And Class S is no exception, though honestly it's super rare for someone to get downgraded. Now that Henry thinks about it, there'll be this one guy, Paul, who'll later drop from Class A to Class C. They'll find out about it later. Still, it's pretty wild seeing all these game characters in front of him. A few years from now, most of these Class S students will be famous worldwide. And about 5 of them will also have the chance to betray the magic world. Mitch is one of them. It'd be awesome if Flame could stop that from happening. Mr. Hillman walked into the classroom and told everyone to chill. He said some of them might have seen him before, but he'd still introduce himself officially. Mr. Hillman is the professor for Class S. The students were whispering that this was the famous professor. The number of dark demonic creatures he's hunted almost hit 4 digits. They call him a 7th-level magic warrior. He's seriously on a whole different level. Mr. Hillman told everyone to settle down. He said there were a lot of talented students here, plus one really unique student. As everyone knows, this academy is where they train battle mages. By becoming magic warriors, they'll get a strict education over the next 3 years. Mr. Hillman doesn't expect all of them to follow this path. Still, he wants everyone to show their best during this time. No one had any questions, so the professor was about to start the lesson. But suddenly, Monica showed up at the door looking all gloomy. To think that someone like her, who follows the rules more than anyone else, was late. Something must have happened. Henry decided to check using the bulbal glasses. But all they said was that she's got an evil mom and that Monica's death is guaranteed. If Isel dies because of Flame, then Monica will die because of both Flame and Isel. You could say this is just the villainess's unavoidable fate. Henry wished he could save her if it were possible. But he's not in a position to help anyone else. He feels bad, but all he can do is keep his distance. The professor told the girl to take her seat, and it just so happened to be next to the hero. She glanced at him sadly and sat down next to him. Henry had a feeling everything was going wrong from the very start. Before starting the lesson, Mr. Hillman said they'd go over the process for switching out the staffs that students would use in school. In classes S and A, the staff swap would happen at the same time. The staff handing ceremony was kinda annoying, but Henry was low-key looking forward to it. At Stella Academy, 2 big events were on the agenda. One was the familiar contract signing ceremony, and the other was the staff handing ceremony. As expected from a high-class place like Stella Academy, the staff handing ceremony was just as extra. Mr. Hillman gathered all the students out on some special field. There were staffs laid out here, ranging from lower tier to mid-tier. All the students had to do was walk up to a staff they vibed with and grab it. Switching staffs after picking one was a total headache, so they had to choose wisely. Honestly, it wasn't even the students doing the picking. It was the other way around. In the ether world, staffs only responded to someone they thought was worthy of commanding them, creating a resonance effect. Basically, you couldn't just snag some high-level staff because you felt like it. Anyway, Henry was wondering which one he should pick. If this was back in the day, he'd go for a staff meant for F class. But now that he was in S class, he had to think harder. The staff that best suited Henry's situation was a magic wand. Staffs were usually split into 2 types: short-form wands and long-form staffs. Wands were mostly used by knights who wanted to shut down spells quickly. On the flip side, staffs were used by bishops who focused on big single attacks that took longer to cast. The students were curious which one the hero would go for. Since he was S-class, there shouldn't be any issue with making a staff resonate. Let them think whatever they want. Henry didn't care. Out of nowhere, some dude stopped him to say hi. The guy turned out to be Uslek. He was straight up shocked Henry didn't know who he was. Uslek asked which staff Henry was planning to pick. Henry just shrugged and said, "Whatever." Uslek sneered and told him to just grab a staff that fit his status as a commoner and not make trouble for the professors. Henry just sighed and told Uslek maybe he should stop causing trouble too. Uslek was stunned by the comeback and started trash-talking, trying to start a fight. So annoying. Maybe Henry should check him out with his glasses. Turns out the dude was Uslek Chekbalant, son of Marquis Chekbalant, lackey of Prince Jeremy and just some third-rate bully. Not exactly special or anything. Anyway, Uslek pointed at the staff he was aiming for and told Henry to watch closely. It was Edmuri Ethamiri. Apparently it was the highest class staff here. Mid-high class staffs were usually used by pro-magic warriors. Meanwhile, students, no matter how talented, were typically stuck with mid-low class staffs. Especially since even pro-magic warriors had a tough time handling mid-low class staffs. Oh, and there was another mid-high class staff here besides Edmuri Ethamiri. It wasn't for anyone to use, though, just for show. Mr. Hillman told everyone to line up in front of the staffs they liked. Prince Scalvin picked a mid-class staff. Princess Monica also went for one, Suaviter Lahavan. No one knew how many students could actually manage mid-class staffs, which were meant for pro-magic users only. This year was wild. Uslek started freaking out, saying he could pull it off too. Looked like he was trying to get a mid-high class staff to resonate. Uslek wanted everyone's attention. He was going to flex his real S-class skills. But when he grabbed the staff, there was this crazy red flash that blinded everyone. No surprise, no resonance. And it looked like Uslek got pretty wrecked. The dude muttered that grabbing a mid-high class staff was impossible. Yeah, probably best for Uslek to call it quits, because the owner of that staff was already set. Mitch decided to try his luck next. Everyone turned to watch him. But people doubted even Mitch could handle Edmuri Ethamiri. The dude grabbed the staff and it resonated instantly, lighting up with rainbow colors. It was insane that a new student managed to make a mid-high class staff resonate. Henry just thought, yeah, called it. Now more people would realize how talented Mitch really was. Mitch noticed Henry staring and hit him with a wink, which was kinda weird and hard to read. Anyway, Flame had her eye on another mid-high class staff, Theravon. But this was where things could go two ways. If she grabbed Theravon, Mitch would be impressed by her brilliance and it'd open up a new path. But if she went for some other staff, it'd lead to a completely different route. Henry needed to use Flame to get Mitch on their side. Flame found Theravon and walked toward it. Now it all came down to her choice. Henry was hoping she'd grab the staff so Mitch would notice her. That'd boost their odds of a happy ending. But to Henry's shock, Flame just walked right past Theravon like she didn't care about it. Henry was in total shock. He figured maybe Flame didn't know about the staff or just didn't have enough info. Either way, this was bad. Flame should have been able to resonate with any staff. She was the main character after all. And what if she picked some random weird staff? That could mess up a bunch of good paths. At this point, Henry had no choice but to nudge Theravon toward her. With a blink, he appeared right next to her in an instant. Flame freaked out, surprised at how he got there so fast. Henry said he just wanted to see which staff she'd pick. She gave him a suspicious look. He said he was just trying to help since she seemed kinda lost. She only said it was none of his business and walked off. Something was definitely off here. Flame was supposed to be friendly with everyone since she was such a social butterfly, but now she was acting cold. Still, Henry couldn't just give up. His life literally depended on this. He stopped her again and offered to help with her choice. Flame told him once again to mind his own business. Henry said there was a staff that suited her perfectly. She got mad and asked what he even knew about staffs. Her reaction was super weird. Maybe Henry did something wrong, or maybe she just didn't care for extra help. He told Flame he'd heard a lot about her and thought she could handle Theravon. Suddenly, there was some noise. Henry froze, completely stunned when he realized he was holding the staff in his own hand. Henry was fuming. Flame was supposed to grab it, not him. He turned around slowly, looking at her sheepishly. Flame just stared at him with a scary expression and asked, "Why?" Yeah, our boy was in deep trouble now. After the ceremony, students went about their day, but all anyone could talk about was how 2 students managed to resonate with mid-high class staffs this year. Historically, only 5 people had ever pulled that off. Now that number had gone up. But weirdly enough, one of the students had only used Blink during the magic demonstration exam. People thought Blink was a trash tier spell, so the whole thing was kinda odd. Flame finally found a quiet spot in the self-study hall. Everywhere she went today, all she heard about was the ceremony. The news about 2 new students getting mid-high class staffs had spread like wildfire, but Flame couldn't wrap her head around it. She was wondering who this Henry guy was who snagged Theravon. She'd read the original novel 3 times before ending up here, and not once did a character named Henry Wilson show up. and the book said no one could grab Theravon. It all felt like Henry was just showing off to her. Well, thinking about it now was pointless, so she moved on. Suddenly, some girls called out to her, asking if she was heading to study by herself again. Flame smiled and asked if they really thought she was some kind of nerd or something. She always told them she didn't have much else to do, so she just ended up studying. One of the girls asked why Flame always called them kids when they were the same age. Flame nervously said it was just a habit and that where she was from, people always treated her like the older one. The truth was, she knew she was in a present-day novel and couldn't really act like a kid. Jackie, one of the girls, still asked if Flame was going to study alone again today. Jackie's style was a bit similar to hers, though she used to be a little sloppy. Flame said she wasn't going alone. There was a special extra meeting soon, so she'd go to that. She quickly said goodbye and suggested they meet up later. As Flame walked, she thought about how hard it was to be a student at this age. Suddenly, she bumped into someone. It was a guy named Liam Stone, the successor to the Master of the Magic Tower. He asked if she was okay. He noticed she didn't look too great and thought something might have happened. Flame was surprised he was worried about her and said she was fine. Then Liam asked if she was heading to study. Flame nodded and said it looked like he was going back to the exclusive S-Class training hall again. Liam said you couldn't slack off when it came to daily training. The guy was just way too earnest. He smiled, put a hand on her shoulder, and said he'd see her later before walking off. Suddenly, Flame noticed that Jackie was sneakily watching her from around the corner. Flame waved at her, but the girl quickly ran off. Not super important right now, so Flame kept going. The self-study hall was hosting a special extra meeting. According to the original novel, Azel and Monica would both be there. It'd be interesting to see the showdown between the main character and the villainess from the romantic fantasy. All the big names like Mitch and Azel were already there. The host was Kyle from A-Class. He looked totally overwhelmed. Well, this was an extra session for students who needed to boost their grades. And considering that famous S-Class students were taking part in a group event, it was kinda expected. Mitch, the leading man of this world, seemed interested in Henry. Flame watched them and thought, no way this is a coincidence. Henry had solved nothing but the 3 questions from hell. She was sure he knew from the start that acing those questions could land him in S-Class. And so, if Henry really knew everything and acted like that, then he's dangerous. The hero just wished someone would take him away from Mitch's grip. A guy with a sweet smile asked why Henry was even here if he didn't need to hear stuff like this. The hero replied that he didn't have a real reason. He was just told to join because his grades sucked. And it's unclear why Mitch is so interested in him. The host, Kyle, told everyone to cut the chatter and get started. Today they'd be tackling questions from the entrance exam. As everyone already knew, this entrance exam had a rep for having ridiculously hard questions that people called the 3 questions from hell, and Kyle managed to solve one of them. He couldn't figure out why people like Henry were even here. He was planning to grow his influence in society by teaching dumb rich brats. But then Kyle thought this might be his shot. He'd heard Henry scored the lowest on the entrance exam, so he'd show everyone he was better. First, Kyle would demonstrate how he solved the problem. He started explaining that this problem was a kind of trap designed to make you screw up while writing everything out on the board. Meanwhile, Mitch curiously asked Henry if he thought Kyle was right. The hero had no idea why Mitch was asking him this. For one, Henry didn't even get what Mitch was trying to do. And then there were those 3 questions from hell. The hero decided to just be honest. He said he didn't know if Kyle was right. The class immediately started whispering about how Henry was saying Kyle's solution was wrong. Everyone stared at him until the host's voice suddenly cut through the noise. Kyle, annoyed, asked why Henry didn't just come down and solve the problem himself then. While the hero was totally panicking, Mitch just kept encouraging him. It looked like he did this on purpose. All right, the hero thought, he'd just get it over with and went down to the board. Henry put on the bulbul glasses, looked at the problem, and thought that these 3 questions from hell were more like a pun-based quiz. For example, like this. A magician cast the spell, Dear Earth, shed tears, and the dirt doubled in size. The question was, why did that happen? The answer's simple. If dirt's crying, then it's composting. Henry thought it sounded dumb too, but that's really how the problem worked. Anyway, Kyle solved this problem like it was some kind of math question. He talked about soil splitting when it cries or something like that. His method was wrong, but he lucked into the correct answer. If there was a similar problem, he'd get it wrong for sure. Henry said he couldn't show how it should be solved, but could point out where Kyle messed up. The problem talked about Earth, but what if it had been water or wind? Kyle said he'd just use a different method. But then Henry pointed out he'd have to redo everything from scratch. Kyle only got the right answer because of luck, not because it was what the test writer intended. Kyle wanted to argue but just lowered his head. admitting Henry was right. Looks like the hero really shook his confidence. Henry started explaining how the problem should actually be solved. Flame couldn't believe other students were writing down his words. Hazel and Monica were supposed to get into a fight, but they got distracted by the problem. This was already going way beyond what was supposed to happen in the story. After the meeting, Mitch said goodbye sweetly and told Henry they'd see each other tomorrow. Henry didn't even want to deal with someone like him. Not tomorrow, not ever. He didn't want to see Mitch for the rest of his life. It's probably because of Terravon. Even though the hero can't use it right now, it still caught Mitch's attention. It's unclear why the staff chose Henry. Other than Flame, no one else has ever used it. Walking down the hallway, the hero noticed Monica. She was standing by the exit like she was waiting for someone. Henry figured it had nothing to do with him, so he just tried to walk past quickly. But suddenly the girl called out to him and said she had a question. Imagine that Monica Biles actually wanted to ask him something. She was curious why Henry didn't explain the solution earlier. It's not like the hero didn't explain it. He just couldn't. How do you logically explain a nonsense quiz? Maybe Monica misunderstood something. Henry answered that he simply had nothing to say. She assumed he didn't want to share his solution in that kind of setting, even though that wasn't the case at all. And then Monica said she'd pay Henry fair compensation. She asked him to explain whatever he came up with to her. That's how they ended up in the library. Henry couldn't understand why Monica was paying him just for figuring out the 3 entrance exam questions. She said she had her own reasons and just asked him to explain. But Monica only messed up on those 3 questions. Shouldn't she feel ashamed asking for help from Henry, who got the rest of the test wrong? The girl replied that she wasn't ashamed at all. The only thing that bothered her was still not knowing the answers to those questions. If she could figure out the solution, she'd do anything. She really seemed like a model student. Henry asked why she came to him of all people, considering Monica was a princess and must have lots of friends to ask. She answered that out of all 1,141 freshmen, counting those who got the 3 questions from hell right, there were only 3 people, including Henry. Those trick questions weren't supposed to be solvable, but Mitch, Flame, and the hero somehow solved them. So now Monica was stuck. Henry was just shocked to learn those questions were traps and no one was supposed to solve them. The girl was surprised he didn't realize that when solving them. Now the hero understood why he was in Class S and why Flame had been holding him back. Henry didn't know all the details of how the world was built. He didn't even know trick questions like that existed. But Flame was different because she had read the entire novel. Even if she didn't know the game's story, she probably knew most of the plot's parameters. Like those 3 trick questions. But since someone not part of the original story had interfered, Flame had no choice but to acknowledge Henry Wilson's existence. So she had a reason for acting the way she did. The hero reminded Monica that she'd hear him out in return for helping her solve that question. And his request was simple: turn Terravon into a magic sword. The blacksmiths in her kingdom should be able to do it easily. But the girl knew only low-level mercenaries used weapons like that, and Henry was a mage. He just said it fit his style. The hero didn't really want to explain to Monica that he was crippled. Anyway, he asked if she was going to do it or not. Monica sighed and said of course she'd do it. Stuff like that should be easy. Then Henry said he'd first explain how to solve the question. The trick was changing your perspective. Monica's weakness was that the magic she used followed the textbook too strictly. She was stuck in a routine, but she wouldn't understand that until her 2nd year after suffering a serious defeat to Flame. Henry didn't think he could give her any major insights right now, but he could nudge her in the right direction. In that case, the hero asked if she knew what a nonsense quiz was. Monica said she thought she'd heard about it before. Henry gave her an example. What's between knee and knee? The girl thought about it for a bit and said it was the back of the knee. But the answer was and. He asked what's between knee and knee. Monica got mad and gave Henry a sharp glare. He told her to chill and take a look at the test question. It had formulas and tricks she didn't know about. That meant she had to solve it using only her creativity. But creativity can't be memorized. Sure, knowing a lot of spells and techniques is important. But for a mage, the most important thing is looking at the world beyond your own thoughts. Magic can evolve even with the smallest changes. Monica just thinks about things the way she sees them. But spells aren't just about memorizing and chanting them. Henry told her she might be better at analytical thinking and judgment than he was, but she lacked the most important trait for a mage: creativity. She seemed to be taking it way too seriously, judging by the look on her face. Henry asked if she understood what he was saying, even if it sounded pretty complicated. Monica said, of course, she understood. That's great, considering the hero had no idea what he was talking about. So they decided to start right away. Henry asked what a person says to a horse when putting it to bed. The girl started thinking but couldn't come up with anything. The answer was time to hit the hay. Next, Henry asked what happened when rock, paper, and scissors entered a race. Monica still didn't have an answer. Henry said the rock started rolling while the paper and scissors stayed put because they can't move. Monica looked super angry like she was about to blow up any second. The next question was what a cloud says to the ocean when it's raining. The girl tried her best and answered, "I'm getting a little emotional." Henry was surprised and said she got it right. For the first time, he saw Monica smile, in the game and in real life. Like a true princess, her creativity was on another level. The girl asked him to stop and move on to the next question. Some time passed and evening came, with all the students busy doing their own thing. In the end, Henry spent 3 hours on those nonsense questions with Monica. He didn't expect her to believe everything he said. Monica was definitely a great mage with a sharp mind, but her weakness was her rigid way of thinking. That weakness could be exploited. Even though she was a villain, Henry felt guilty. He needed to hurry and get Taravon turned into a magic sword. What's done is done. He decided not to waste time and went to buy the books he needed for his classes. After a bit of searching through his memories, the hero finally found the place. When he walked in, the shop looked like a total mess. But Henry knew the owner of this bookstore had a weird habit of pretending to sleep while watching customers. In this rundown, nameless bookstore were hidden Maella's study notes, written by a student who graduated from the academy 10 years ago. In the game, you could start studying with a button press on the screen. But in real life, you'd need the actual textbook for the subject. Plus, depending on the textbook, your grade improvement speed would vary. At first, Henry bought his textbooks from well-known bookstores, but he later found out that the good ones were hidden in stores without signs. If he studied magical engineering with Maella's notes, he was almost guaranteed to get all A's. With Bulbul's points, he could get decent grades, but unlocking the secret recipe would only be possible with specific books. And Henry found the one he needed. He reached for it, and his hand accidentally touched someone else's. It was a girl, Azel. She was surprised Henry knew her, though it shouldn't have been surprising since she was famous. Azel remembered he was from the supplementary group and said his name was Henry. It seemed like she didn't remember meeting him before entering the academy. The girl said she liked the debates, but was a bit disappointed Henry couldn't finish his explanations. If she thought about it, Azel hadn't figured out the question completely either. She took the book and said goodbye. Luckily, she didn't take the study notes Henry needed. It wasn't clear why she was even here. At another shelf, Azel grabbed a book but sighed and put it back after seeing the price tag. This bookstore mostly sold used books, so it was usually visited by broke students like Henry. Azel, coming from a struggling family that had lost everything, probably had no other choice but to come here too. Her father was probably killed by dark demonic people. It was pretty sad. A princess like her came to buy second-hand books but was worried about the price because she had no money. To make things worse, in the original novel, Azel didn't have a happy ending either. She died even before Flame, the main character of this world. You could say Azel was the unluckiest character in the game. Henry brought several books to the shopkeeper and asked for them. He noticed Azel looking at him kind of weirdly. She shyly said it seemed like Henry had picked some interesting topics. Azel wondered why he'd even bother reading topics like advanced ceiling theory and ancient magic related to using items. In today's world, where alchemy and magical engineering were already developed, that skill was hardly ever used. It turned out Henry knew that kind of information wasn't used often. Azel was surprised he was getting those books for that exact reason. The hero said that everyone thought like her. That's why it was easier to get top grades in this class. As Azel said, not many people wanted to take classes on ceiling theory, but that's why Henry could spend less time on them and get better grades compared to other subjects. Thanks to that, he wouldn't have any problems this semester. The next day came. In the first class Azel was heading to, they were studying nihilism. It was an easy subject to get good grades in, so it shouldn't be too bad. But when she walked into the classroom, she saw a ton of students filling up almost all the seats. Everyone had signed up for the class because they'd heard it was easy to get good grades. Apparently, the rumors spread fast and all the smart kids signed up too. Azel sat down, thinking there was nothing she could do about it, and that she'd have to work harder in her other classes. After class, most of the students headed to the cafeteria for lunch. Azel felt anxious because if so many people took all the same classes as her, it would be hard to get a scholarship. She wanted to grab something to eat too, but since she only had 60 meal tickets for the semester, she figured she'd just buy some bread to eat today. Walking down the hall, Azel noticed Henry in one of the classrooms. It turned out there was a lecture going on, but there were barely any students there and they were all people with bad grades. The lecture might get canceled. Azel thought if she signed up for this class, she could boost her grades without spending too much time on it. And if she used the extra time to prep for other subjects, she could rack up more money from scholarships. She was shocked. Henry knew this subject was an easy grade and planned his schedule to make life simpler. But that can't be true, and Azel brushed it off as a coincidence. Professor Layden, who teaches divine lunar studies, started talking about how everyone knows the origin of magic. Thanks to the founder mage, the white mage, who spread magic worldwide, humans and other species learned how to use it. He taught elves nature magic. Dwarves learned forge magic. Humans got elemental magic, and then he ascended to the heavens. Listening to all this, Henry wondered if he could survive 3 years of this. Going through school all over again at his age felt torturous. He could have just skipped this whole lecture with a button in the game. But this lecture actually mattered. It might give him a hint about the true ending. At least that's what he guessed. Then he noticed Azel sitting nearby. Has she always been in this class? Henry didn't remember any of the main characters taking this class. Whatever, though, it didn't matter to him. Layden explained how human curiosity didn't stop at elemental magic. Human mages traveled around the world and started stealing magic from other species. But even then, it wasn't enough. Still, they couldn't learn magic beyond that point. The founder mage left behind 12 divine moons and vanished. Professor Layden asked the class if anyone knew anything about the 12 divine moons. Azel answered, saying the 12 divine moons were guardians who protected the balance of power on the continent. Supposedly, they were scattered across the land, carrying out their duties until about 1,000 years ago. Exactly. The professor explained that they each had unique powers they used to protect the continent. For instance, the divine moon, symbolizing summer, the sixth moon of red summer, wielded a red flame said to never go out. If you go to the deep sea of Alamanc, you can still see the red flame burning. So if any students were curious, they could go check it out. Henry figured that was a joke because any living thing entering the Sea King Alamanque's domain would get obliterated. The professor also pointed out the shore of Levian, a massive whirlpool in the ocean frozen by the 12th moon of blue winter. Each divine moon had its own unique power. But it said that if they were all gathered together, a miracle would happen. One student raised their hand to ask about this miracle, but no one knows what it is. The moons have been asleep for 1,000 years. Layden's right. At least Henry met a few of the divine moons while playing the game, but he only encountered 5 of them through limited time events. That only happened because Henry gathered info from other players in the community. No single player had managed to find more than he did. If Henry's guesses were correct, these 12 divine moons probably had something to do with the true ending. If no one's unlocked the true ending in the past 10 years, the answer must lie in content no one's been able to reach yet. Henry had only managed to meet 5 of them after risking his life multiple times, but it seemed like he had no choice if he wanted to see the true ending. He'd have to start over. Meanwhile, over in the schoolyard, Mrs. Baker's fire class was underway. She told the students that strength wasn't everything. It didn't matter how strong your attack was. If you couldn't hit your target, it was pointless. The students started practicing on special dummies while the professor kept an eye on their attacks. There was a big explosion on the field, but the dummy didn't take any damage. Mrs. Baker told Monica it was awful. After class, Monica felt down about showing another pathetic performance in front of her mom. She must be so disappointed. Suddenly, another student walked up to Monica and asked if she was okay. The girl sat next to her and started saying how amazing the princess was. Monica had used the same magic as the girl, but hers was several times stronger. The princess wasn't comforted because she couldn't even aim properly. But the girl insisted Monica's magic was incredible, saying it looked super cool. Honestly, she'd heard about Princess Biles since she was a kid because she was a fire mage too. The girl's name was Arshuin. Monica thought she'd heard of her before. A next-level fire magic prodigy. Monica figured that even compared to her magic, Arshuin probably wasn't all that. She thought the girl must really like having such high accuracy. Arshuin replied that if Monica kept training, she wouldn't even be able to compete with her. The princess told her to stop, but even so, she felt a little better after that conversation. Monica said goodbye, leaving Arshuin by herself. As she left the classroom, she ran into her personal guard, Mandy. Tea and ginseng candies were ready for the princess. Mandy wanted to talk about reforging the staff Monica had asked about earlier. Since it was a good staff, they said it would turn into a top-tier magic sword, but there was something off about it. Mandy had heard the staff constantly drained its users' mana. Monica was surprised because that sounded like a dark, demonic tool. But that wasn't quite right. Mandy explained it was always resonating with nature's mana. In other words, the staff drew mana from its user and resonated with nature's mana. Monica didn't understand why such a trashy staff was considered mid to high tier. Mandy explained that's exactly why it was only mid-tier. Its original ability massively boosted the user's mana, making it high tier or better. But since it drained mana just by holding it, the staff got downgraded to mid-tier. Monica was shocked. How could a student even use that? Mandy was just as confused. The princess realized the staff wasn't for them to resonate with, but she didn't think most people would use it, even if they could, unless someone had an insane amount of mana, or none at all. Monica said Henry would figure it out. Anyway, the princess was once again reminded how unique our hero really was. A few days passed after the semester officially began. Henry was sitting in a mana orbitology lecture. Professor Carlame explained that offensive magic required more detailed study than any other type, which is why mana orbitology was a required subject. Starting today, students would study orbitology with a focus on shooting and aiming for their duels. Carlame suggested they discuss an orbital formula. From a distance of 760 meters north, Cholsu was moving south at a speed of 12.6 meters per second. What orbit and predicted observed distance would Yanhee need to hit Cholsu with water-type magic? The students muttered that if you didn't have a water attribute, you couldn't solve this, and the professor was just trying to mess with them. This was so boring. Henry couldn't figure out why these classes were harder than Korean. The professor saw Henry yawning and called him up to the board to solve the problem. After a bit, with the help of his bulbul glasses, Henry got it done. Professor Carlin was surprised he solved it so easily. Even he didn't realize the Reed-Bork equation could be simplified like that. He thought Henry's first magic was water attribute, but it wasn't. Finally, class ended and the students headed off to their next subjects. Suddenly, Azel called out to Henry. She said she had a question for him. Watching him, the girl realized something. If you forget about Henry's grades, the guy's definitely smart, like even compared to the top students. The level of the question he solved in class was at least college level. Maybe even something a professor would tackle. If Stella's supposed to be the place where geniuses gather, then what's Henry's deal? At first, Azel thought there was no way, but now she's sure. This guy's definitely got some kind of strategy for picking his classes. If that's the case, she's got to figure it out, so she asked him what class he's going to take next. Henry was totally thrown and asked her if she had a crush on him or something. Azel, all embarrassed, said that's disgusting. He was like, wow, it's even more disgusting for me. Geez, this guy's such an adult. Anyway, he asked her why she even cared. She did some digging into his classes, and apparently every single one is easy to get high grades in. Azel straight up asked him where he learned that strategy because it's super important to her. Henry said he didn't learn it anywhere, it's just a coincidence. If that's all she wanted, he was ready to bounce. But Azel caught up to him and told him to wait. He asked why the hell she was following him and said she should just go learn from someone else since there are plenty of smart people here. Or better yet, just copy what he's doing if she already looked it up. But she told him everyone who takes Divine Moon Studies gets an A+, so it doesn't matter if she takes it too. And if she signs up for the other classes he's in, it might mess up his grades. Henry knows that if she doesn't get a scholarship, she'll lose more than anyone else. But even in this situation, she's worried about other people's grades. Even though she's kind of annoying, she still feels like the main female lead. She asked him to recommend one class where it's easy to get a good grade. Like, does she seriously think her looks are going to convince him? For her, that's weird because looking at her own face is like her stress reliever. Azel cracked a joke. She knew Henry was going to act like this, so she came prepared with a deal. Why are all these kids obsessed with making deals? Then she asked him if he knew anything about the story of Phantom Tower No. 7. Henry was surprised and nodded. Azel wasn't expecting that since not a lot of people know about it. She started explaining that it's this abandoned building that just vanished, and there are a bunch of barriers that won't let anyone even get close to where the tower used to be. Suddenly, Henry stopped her. He's about to lose his mind. This is seriously important info, because with this, Flame could boost her connection to the male lead like crazy. So if Flame knows about it, that means Azel must have known it in the original novel too. Azel was supposed to share this info only with the male lead, not some random guy like Henry. So he told her it's a scary, boring story and he doesn't want to hear it. Azel caught up to him again. Henry said he'd just tell her for free. She was surprised because he acted like he wasn't going to share and then changed his mind. Henry was like, it happens. Plus, it's enough that Azel genuinely wants to share it with him. It's not about grades, but it's something useful for her. He told her to take Meditation of the Abyss as one of her humanities electives. Taking that as a humanities class, along with Divine Moon Studies and meditation? Azel thought maybe he's into cultivation, but nope. She needed some kind of explanation. Henry started explaining that his teacher used to be in the position of bishop, just like her. And thanks to meditation, she massively boosted her magic power. Azel was shocked. Is that really possible just from meditation? Actually, it's not well known yet, but for bishops who use large-scale destructive magic, meditation's like super important. Since precise spellcasting comes from formulas and equations, but ultimately it's controlled by the mind that moves the mana. Henry usually doesn't tell anyone this, but Azel's an exception because she's cute, even though earlier he called her ugly. Anyway, she smiled and thanked him. She's bummed it's not a class that'll help her grades, but she'll take it anyway. The girl happily ran off. Henry actually told her, and it freaks him out a little thinking about how this might change the future. But if he just leaves her out of fear, Azel's gonna die a tragic death in this life too. It'd be awesome if meditation could help her. And only now did Henry remember, oh yeah, he's a mage too, and he hasn't thought about training at all. His character in the game strictly trained his body, awakened mana body enhancement, and got insanely strong. In the game, you could gain experience with just a click of a button, but now he can do it for real. Lately, things have been quiet, no story events, no monster hunts, so Henry couldn't gain any experience. He's got to thank Azel for this. Later, Henry got back to the dorms. They're huge, of course. At Stella, all the students live on campus. The dorm system was supposed to be like extra content in the game where you could decorate your room for fun. But for Henry, it's basically his only home since his village burned down. Dorms are divided by class rank. The room sizes are the same, but the number of people per room depends on the class. Obviously, Class S got the top floors. Henry felt lonely, but he could finally use the space properly. So he decided to start meditating, sitting in a lotus position. Henry told himself that stats aren't the most important thing. Since this is real life, he needs to get used to his body. In the game, his character was a genius who managed to manifest a sword aura by using the fact that mana endlessly flows through and from him. No one paid attention to him, so no one realized Henry was a genius swordsman and the only one in this world who reached the pinnacle of mastery. Now he has to walk that path all over again. His breathing controls the flow of mana through his body. If Henry can slowly increase the amount of mana with each breath, eventually he'll be able to draw in enough at once. Skills don't level up just from accumulating experience. To improve a skill, you have to use it constantly. Basically, all you gotta do is train. Hours passed, and it was already getting light outside. Opening his eyes, Henry felt that same sensation his character must have experienced, like someone who embraced mana leakage syndrome as part of themselves at a young age. It's faint, but he can definitely feel it. Because of this, his skills mana leakage syndrome and flicker leveled up. Henry's one step closer to his goal. He's gonna get the true ending no matter what. Back to Flame. The field and the breeze feel like they were created with magic, but they're so realistic. The Stella Dome is a kind of pocket dimension set up on campus. It allows complete control over the size of the area and its features. All sports events and other activities, as well as dungeons, gates, and monster training, all happen here. A total of 141 people were gathered on the field, 50 students each from Class A1 and A2 and 41 from Class S. If this were the novel, there'd be 39 in Class S. Flame expected there to be 40, including her, but never thought there'd be one extra. She doesn't get where Henry Wilson came from. In the novel, there were 1,140 students in the first year, and with her, it became 1,141. In other words, Henry was in the original novel too. Flame decided to figure things out gradually. After all, she's the only person in the world who knows the story. Class was about to start. Flame overheard someone talking about whether young Master Jeremy finished signing up for his classes. The guys signed up for soft magic studies because they heard Jeremy did. Jeremy smiled sweetly and said, "Well, let's have fun together then. This dude's a prince." In the novel, he was obsessed with Azel but got rejected by her. In the end, he turns into a villain. Jeremy looks nice, but every single thing he does is calculated. Flame has to make sure not to get too close to him. Of course he's good-looking. She gets why so many people suck up to him. Prince Jeremy's gang is probably the most noticeable group in the school. Flame needs to stay focused since this world is her reality now. She's got to prepare for the future. Mr. Hillman showed up and said they'd start with a simple training session before today's lesson. He needs to know the students' skill levels to teach them properly. He's going to be supervising the training. If anyone doesn't like it, that's not his problem. As everyone knows, the professors, have the right to add or deduct points. They should keep in mind that they'll get expelled if their score falls below a certain number. Now, Mr. Hillman's going to explain the training. They'll be doing it in a dungeon. The professor will simulate situations that happen in real dungeons, including traps and monsters, to test everyone. Students will earn 4 points for defeating a level 1 danger monster, 8 points for a level 2 monster, 20 points if they find a pointer. The top 5 students will get a small reward and privileges at the shop. Any students who fail will lose points. If they're scared to fail or go solo, they can team up. But they should know the points will be split among all team members. If students manage to take down another student, they'll get all of their points. That's it. Mr. Hillman wished them luck and disappeared. Suddenly, there was an earthquake and something started breaking through the ground. The new location turned out to be the map, Jack and the Beanstalk. Flame grabbed her staff and decided to take action. Out of nowhere, Jackie asked if she'd be going solo during the dungeon exercise. Sure, teaming up has its perks, but it's way better to go alone to rack up more points. Flame apologized and said she'd try going solo this time. Jackie understood. She'd have to split points with her teammates, so there's no helping it. Flame felt like Jackie was being sarcastic. She told Jackie they could team up next time. After Flame walked away, she thought she heard Jackie and the other girls mocking her, probably just that age. An hour later, Flame was exhausted. She just wanted this damn exercise to end already. Then, out of nowhere, field attacks started coming in alongside the monsters. But for Flame, it was no big deal, just as expected from Stella. Even dungeon exercises here are no joke. So far, she scored 18 points. Not bad, but one pointer could easily make up that difference. Flame kept moving but started feeling someone's presence. And it was definitely human. But how could a student hide their presence that well? No big deal. After all, Flame was also hiding her presence using Nature's Union. With her abilities like binding, destruction, defense, and healing, it's a solid choice to ambush an opponent. As she got closer, she realized it was Henry, who was also rolling solo. Flame remembered how tons of students tried to form a faction around Henry, but he rejected all of them. She had no idea what was going through his head. Then she noticed a pointer in his hand. Perfect chance. Flame decided to test this guy. They were about 15 meters apart. Flame figured he wouldn't be able to counterattack at that distance, so she cast a light bullet, shooting it straight at Henry. But he dodged it effortlessly using Flicker. Flame was shocked he managed to dodge a second-class spell from that far away. Meanwhile, Henry moved back a bit farther. Was she seriously trying to kill him with a random light bullet? Thank God his mana leakage syndrome skill had leveled up. Otherwise, he'd be in real trouble. Henry had 2 flickers left, so if he used the terrain to his advantage, he could probably deal with Flame at some point. But avoiding her was the smarter move. He teleported even farther away. Should be fine now. His current goal was 5th place, so no need to take risks. The reward for 5th place was ethereal roots, which boost health and strength by a decent amount. The top 4 spots would go to the main characters anyway. In his current state, Henry needed 3 more pointers. But then he ran into a whole group of hostile students. Their leader was Raiden, a guy who'd gotten pretty famous at school lately. He was part of Uslek's crew who worked under Jeremy. Still, for someone in a gang, this dude had racked up a lot, 3 pointers. These guys heard Henry was a failing student who cheated his way into Class S. Raiden said Stella's standards had really dropped lately. Damn, these guys couldn't even come up with creative insults. They told Henry to hand over the pointer since they'd run into him. Henry said no. Raiden just laughed at that. He asked if Henry really thought he could take them on by himself. They were talking trash about how he couldn't even use magic, let alone that amazing staff of his. Henry was thinking about his next move. With just first-class Flicker, it'd be tough to take on Raiden from his well-known family. If only Henry had 3 flickers. But still, Henry had one option, the pointer in his hand. And the fact that this place was a dungeon. Henry held out the pointer like he was ready to hand it over. But in a split second, he was right in front of Raiden, landing a hit. Raiden screamed that he'd get Henry, this damn commoner, but Henry was already gone. Raiden spun around, and there Henry was, right behind him. It was risky, but Henry thanked him for the second pointer. Raiden couldn't figure out how Henry had grabbed it and demanded he hand it back. But Henry just said no again. And these pointers, they're crazy useful. Henry had found that out by accident while playing the game. Turns out they're a bug. Thanks to their insanely high durability, which lets them resist magic from students, they've got the power of most magical tools. While other mages use them to channel magic, for someone like Henry who fights physically, a weapon with strong offensive power can be used to its fullest. Raiden was furious that Henry dared to steal from him and told his gang to attack already. But just their luck, an earthquake hit at that exact moment. Raiden still told everyone to group up and charge their magic so they wouldn't lose this bastard. At that moment, Henry took off running. Their magic wasn't bad, better than Henry expected. But slipping away with Flicker wasn't hard at all. Now the guys couldn't find him. With years of Duel experience from the game, using the terrain to his advantage was second nature to Henry. Raiden said they just needed to land one hit. But the quake wouldn't stop. He told everyone to wait for the ground to settle and to attack as soon as they saw Henry. If their magic failed, there'd be a magical rebound. Once again, Henry struck out of nowhere, catching the guys off guard. And when they started casting spells, the magical rebound hit. Now it was over. The guys were completely disoriented. Henry smirked and showed off the 3-pointers in his hand. Raiden was raging, saying the last one could stay with them, whatever. Henry said it was fun and took off. Raiden and his gang were left in total despair, furious about how they'd been outplayed and robbed. Finding a quiet spot, Henry said he'd hit the jackpot. If he'd fought them normally, they'd have looted him. But since it was a dungeon, the rules were different. That's the wisdom of an adult. Henry felt like he noticed something strange from somewhere. When he turned around, he realized a powerful fire attack was almost on him. Luckily, he dodged it, but Henry almost got caught. That was Monica's spell. She showed up and asked why he didn't take the last pointer from those punks. Henry said she got it all wrong. It wasn't that he didn't want to take it, he just couldn't. Besides, what's it to Monica anyway? She stayed quiet. Henry got pissed, saying she was just waiting for him to handle them so she could snatch all the pointers at once. And he even trained with her. When he asked how she could do that, Monica just reminded him of her royal bloodline. Since Henry understood, she said they'd settle it with a duel. Taking the last pointer from a commoner would be beneath a princess, so Monica said she'd win it fair and square in battle and take all the pointers. Talking about honor, huh? Henry asked if she really enjoys picking on weaklings. Monica fired back, saying she saw how he was toying with those idiots from the start. He wasn't even planning to use proper magic against them. At the start of the trial, she was in a rush. If she didn't rack up points quickly, her mom would scold her again. Then she heard shouting as she passed by. Monica got closer and saw it was Raiden and his goons. She thought about jumping in, but even for her, 6 opponents were a bit much. So she decided to wait it out and snag the pointers when the fight was over. But Monica was shocked to see this commoner fighting without using anything but blink magic. Even though Raiden and his crew were weaker than her, those idiots still grew up in elite mage families. If Henry's good enough to toy with those fools, Monica figured she'd have to bring her A-game to burn him down. And that's exactly what she did. No surprise coming from a princess. It was straight up terrifying. Good thing Henry trained his 6th sense in advance. It's hard to dodge with just 2 blinks. There's gotta be another way out. Monica asked if Henry planned to pull out his staff, but he reminded her that she was the one who took it for reforging. Still, he should at least have the basic staff they got at the entrance ceremony. Oh, right. Henry totally forgot about that. He got the staff during initiation and stuffed it in storage right away. He didn't think he'd ever need it. As always, he laughs it off. Monica's out here giving it her all while this brain-dead pleb keeps making fun of her. She doesn't care about other losers, but against her, he'd better take it seriously. Henry always fights with everything he's got, he just can't use magic. Monica warned him that if he didn't step it up, she'd really take him down. She's dead set on crushing this pleb today. Henry's panicking. No matter how much he blinks, her attack range is massive. But thanks to his 6th sense, he heard where the attack was coming from and managed to dodge. He got lucky this time, but next time, not so much. Even if he gets close to Monica, she'll just use her magic right away. Henry knows this all too well from losing countless times to fire mages in PvP. Monica's way stronger than she looks. If they were fighting in an open field, she'd obliterate him in a minute. No, it wouldn't even be a fight, it'd be a slaughter. Fire arrows came flying at him in waves, but Henry wasn't about to just sit there. Gripping his pointers tightly, he charged forward. Since everything seemed slowed down for him, he managed to deflect the arrows one by one. Monica never imagined someone could block magic with a weapon. Henry's getting into the zone. Fighting a mage isn't like gaming with a keyboard and mouse. His body feels different. He can sense the intense flow of mana, almost like he can grab it with his hands. His 6th sense feels as natural as seeing or hearing now. Monica's stunned. This wild terrain covered in vegetation should have given her the upper hand with her fire attribute. If that's the case, she'll just crank up her magic even more. Henry realizes he can't stay defensive forever. He's got to use these pointers somehow to break Monica's magic shield. He found the perfect moment and blinked closer to her. Monica began casting Incinerating Storm, a spell fire mages use for close combat. It triggers an explosion that blasts anyone within 2 meters. But Henry's been through this a bunch of times already. Before she could do anything, he shattered her magic shield, blocking all her spells. Henry knelt down and told Monica he'd won. Holding back tears and frustration, she asked who he even was. Henry said he's just a regular student. Who else? Then out of nowhere, he calmly told Flame to stop hiding and come out. She walked over and said she wasn't hiding, but had no clue how Henry figured out she was there. Henry lied, saying it was just a hunch. In truth, his 6th sense from the Mana Leak syndrome tipped him off. But Flame asked how he knew he could break a magic shield with training equipment like pointers. Was that a hunch too? It must not have been in the original novel, so coming clean wasn't an option. With a dumb grin, Henry said they were just super durable. Sure, training gear has its limits, but he figured it'd be enough to break the shield. Flame asked why he thought regular knights disappeared from this world. She had a point, and Henry didn't even know how to respond. Flame already thought Henry was weird before, but now it was on another level. She asked who he really was. So, not even a month in, and it's come to this. Laying all his cards on the table would be way too risky. Flame's still wary of him. Henry said he might seem sketchy, but he's not a bad guy to her. He wants to help Flame. Before she could process or ask anything, Henry said he'd like to explain more but didn't have time and had to leave. He was just about to celebrate getting away when a bunch of pointers came flying at him. He turned around and told Monica that if she had a problem, she could have just said so. She thought he'd catch them, considering how he dodged traps and magic. Well, there's nothing he can do now. Even a sixth sense has its limits. The duration depends on mental strength, and Henry's mental strength just ran out. His head was pounding from the hit. He asked why the girls started throwing stuff. Monica, having lost, was handing over her pointers. Looks like the pride takes over. But if he grabs all the pointers, his ranking's gonna skyrocket, and he doesn't even care about the other rewards. So he picked up just one and said the rest could stay with the girls. A guy showing mercy to a defeated opponent? That's way too cool for someone like Henry. Flame thought he was a complete idiot. Monica said he wasn't exactly known for his common sense, just a commoner after all. But she was even more curious about who he really was. Meanwhile, the professors were closely watching how the test was going down. Telex from the Council of Elders said Class S had some insane students this year, and coming to check it out was totally worth it. Besides Telex, a bunch of big shots showed up, like the board member from the Blue Tower, just to watch the newbies' practical test. Mr. Hillman figured this was how it should be when you're out scouting for fresh talent. He was sure almost every professor was keeping tabs on the trial. On one of the screens, they spotted Mitch and Liam going at it. Mitch kept using Blink, a third-tier spell, over and over. To all the professors, it seemed nuts for a 17-year-old to pull that off. A typical mage doesn't hit the third tier until they're about 30, and here's Mitch, slinging that magic like it's nothing at 17. Both guys were using 3 elements in their fight. Most mages can only use 1 element, and even mastering 2 takes years of hard work. Real talent shows when someone can handle 3 or more elements, and these 2 were born with it. Out of nowhere, a giant crow showed up on the battlefield. The professors thought it might be a secret boss. But the bird didn't attack. It just gracefully landed right between Mitch and Liam. Off the crow stepped Isel Mulf, apologizing for interrupting their duel. A secret boss only shows up if someone has the right skills. You've got to find it first, and even then, taking it down is no joke. Taking something like that solo? Unreal. The elders mentioned she was the eldest daughter of the traitor, Archduke Mulf. What a waste. If not for her dad, that talent could have gone so much further. But their attention quickly shifted to the princess of the Adolabit kingdom. Everyone was curious who she was fighting. The crowd was stunned to see blink spells coming from some guy they'd never even heard of before. Plenty of mages tried to master blink, but they failed. Some ended up crippled, others straight up died. In the end, everyone gave up, deciding the spell was impossible to control. But then a student showed up who could completely own it, like blink was just a part of who he was. Mr. Hillman told the interested elders that the guy's name was Henry Wilson, a totally unique student specializing in blink. Mitch, Liam, and Isel's overwhelming power was one thing, but this was on a whole different level. Elder Telex asked why Henry wasn't using any other techniques and just messing around. He could have won ages ago if he used different spells. Then someone walked in and said that Henry was fighting seriously right now, that someone turned out to be Eltman Eltwin. He said Henry had been fighting seriously from the start. Mr. Eltwin was curious about how Henry fought. It reminded him of the code of honor from way back in the day. He was talking about chivalry, which disappeared when swords stopped being a thing. Mr. Hillman realized Eltwin was talking about the knight's way of thinking, those who wielded swords even though they lived in a world of magic. The code of honor was the essence of heroes who had been protecting this world from evil since forever. They say those knights always fought evil with nothing but a sword in hand. It's still kind of dumb to use a weapon when magic exists, but this student really uses a pointer like it's a sword. The fact that Eltman Eltwin, the headmaster of Stella Academy, a 9th-rank magic maestro, and one of the 10 greatest sages on the continent, took interest in him says a lot. The first practical test was over. They moved on to the training grounds for Class S. Liam was practicing on a dummy. He was almost out of mana, but he still thought it wasn't enough. The guy was still far behind. Out of 1,141 students who took part in the practical test, 39 were expelled. Isel, who took down the mysterious bird, got first place, and Liam came in second. Mitch came in sixth, but Liam still didn't feel like a winner. If Isel hadn't interfered back then, it probably would have ended badly for him. It's always been like this since the first time they met. Mitch doesn't give a damn about anything and still somehow always comes out on top no matter what he does. Even during the practical test, Liam set up magic circles all over the area and carefully analyzed Mitch's moves. But Mitch still easily countered his attacks. Liam couldn't believe he just couldn't beat him and that the gap in their talent was that huge. No, there was no time for self-pity. He needed to work even harder. Monica showed up at the training grounds. She noticed how unusually angry the usually calm Liam looked. Well, her mood wasn't much better, so she immediately started blasting a dummy to bits. Even after losing one of her pointers, the princess still came in third place, which was annoying. Her mom seemed happy, but if Monica hadn't gotten that rank, she definitely would have been punished. It pissed her off that some random commoner acted like he was the center of the universe. Watching her, Liam thought the princess might have her own issues. Maybe it was just his imagination, but her magic seemed a lot more precise. Monica's fire magic was insanely powerful, to the point where it was almost impossible to control. He couldn't believe she'd improved so much in such a short time. Probably just his imagination. Meanwhile, the princess didn't want to admit it, but her training with Henry had been helpful. Once she figured out how to solve trick questions, her magical abilities started improving steadily. Henry was just a regular pleb with terrible grades and an awful attitude, but Monica was sure he was the only one who knew how to handle her weaknesses. So annoying. Mandy showed up with the Terravon staff that Monica had asked to be reforged recently. Her assistant wanted to hand it over to Henry right away, and Monica nodded. But then the princess stopped her and asked for the box instead. Monica headed to the second tower because she'd heard Henry was somewhere around there. He was probably there to meet with the professor since that's where the labs and faculty offices were. That's when Monica realized she wasn't sure why she even came here. She could have just handed the staff to Henry back at the training grounds. If she kept this up, people might start thinking she was chasing after some commoner. The princess was about to leave when she ran into her mentor, Hammerl. It felt like just yesterday the woman was teaching Monica magic in the castle, and now she'd grown up so much. Professor Hammerl asked what had brought the princess here. Monica said she had some business but was already leaving. Then Mrs. Hammerl mentioned that things were kind of chaotic right now, so it was probably for the best. Some important figures in the magical world had shown up and caused a stir over a student named Henry Wilson. Monica asked what was up with that pleb. Professor Hammerl figured she already knew since they'd fought each other, but that student hadn't used magic. So her mentor had seen that duel. Monica felt so embarrassed that her teacher, who she respected the most, had witnessed her acting so improperly. Professor Hammerl noticed the princess's gloomy mood. She told her not to blame herself since her opponent had fought with everything he had. Even though he didn't use magic, it was about his creed. The headmaster had said that watching the duel, he saw it as an attempt to bring back the code of honor that had vanished generations ago. Monica called it nonsense that Henry was trying to bring back chivalry, but he definitely used a pointer like it was a sword during the fight. That's probably why he wanted that magic sword. However, Monica said refusing to use magic at a magic academy would be a huge obstacle for Henry. He'd definitely lose points during magic practicums. Professor Hammerl replied that Henry chose this path despite the difficulties. She thought it was amazing that Henry kept pushing himself further even after mastering Blink. It made her think his creed might actually be legit. Later, Monica thought it all over. If anyone even hinted at wanting to be a knight these days, they'd instantly become a laughingstock. But it seemed like Henry genuinely wanted to follow the code of honor for real. The princess was so mad at him and even told him to quit messing around. Then he showed up and asked what Monica was doing there, all while munching on some ether roots. The girl panicked and yelled that she wasn't there because of him, but Henry hadn't even said that. Monica got flustered and just told him to take the sword. When he opened the box, he saw a shapeless blade inside. As expected from the Adolabits, the craftsmanship was unmatched. Good thing Henry had helped the princess. He asked if he could keep the box. He thought he could make some good money selling it to someone. Monica told him to do whatever he wanted. The girl was about to leave but decided to ask if it was true that Henry wasn't planning to use any other magic. Monica got flustered again and left, telling him to forget about it. Mr. Hillman had said something similar about other magic earlier. Like, he understood Henry's intentions and respected his creed even though it was a tough path. Well, all's well that ends well. Even just with this magic sword, the hero would be safe enough for the next episode. Time to give it a shot. Henry started channeling mana into the sword. It worked better than he expected. The power was solid. But it'd be even cooler if Flame got her hands on it. The main heroine was special. She could master elf, dwarf, and angel magic despite being human. This staff constantly drains the user's mana, so just anyone can't use it. But Flame kept her mana flowing with nature energy and used the staff as her finisher. Henry, on the other hand, had no mana to begin with. Even though he constantly absorbed mana, it didn't stay in his body and immediately leaked out because of his mana drain syndrome. In other words, the concentration of mana in his breath became the source for Teravon. The hero decided to check his stats. Thanks to the prize for 5th place in the practical training, his strength had gone up a bit. And now that he had a weapon, he could boost his stats instead of spending experience points. Henry needed to start training with the sword. There'd be no more free time for him now. The Defense Against Magic instructor Varian told the class that starting today, they'd be practicing real magic. Everyone spread out across the room and pulled out their staffs. There are plenty of talented students in this group. Good thing the professor divided them by skill level. Then he noticed that infamous student from the S class, a commoner who resonated with a mid-high level staff and snagged 5th place in the dungeon trial. Now that's someone Varian really can't stand. He walked over and asked Henry why he wasn't doing anything. Henry replied that he was studying a different defense technique, so basic magic training wasn't really his thing. The audacity. Varian could understand if Henry was studying some kind of inherited magic like Princess Adelabet, but how would a commoner know something like that? Varian had heard Henry couldn't even use magic besides flicker. In that case, he offered Henry the chance to demonstrate his amazing defense technique to the other students, and his opponent would be Morso from Class B. To stay employed at this school, a regular magic defense instructor needs connections. Morso Dordan's from the Scalvan Empire, so leaving a good impression wouldn't hurt. Plus, showing off some flashy magic in a duel against an S-class student would be a win for him. Varian asked Henry if he was down, and our guy figured why not. So both opponents stepped up onto the platform. Morso's friends were yelling for him to squash Henry like a bug and humiliate him in front of everyone. Guess that guy's part of Uslek and Raiden's crew, too. These kids are so painfully basic. But hey, that's fine. Henry only bothers showing up to these classes because they're mandatory. There's nothing for him to do here since he can't use magic anyway. Varian's been known for his nasty attitude since year 1. It's time to see what Henry's training has amounted to. The duel's rules are simple. One attacks while the other defends, then they switch. Using magic out of turn is forbidden. Morso gets to go first. The class is whispering about how Morso knows earth element attack magic and there's no way to defend against that. Jeremy's just watching with his usual calm smile. Varian shouts for everyone to get ready and begin. Morso uses second-rank magic, but everyone knows that during basic magic training, you're only allowed to use first-rank spells. Now people are wondering if Henry's really going to be okay. Morso casts the piercing power of the Dordans, glaring at our guy and calling him an arrogant bastard. With one swing of his sword, Henry shatters the magic shield. Morso can't believe his spell just vanished. It's like Henry sliced the magic itself with his sword, but how would a spell just disappear from that? No, Varian's thinking a swing alone wouldn't make the magic vanish. But Henry definitely dispelled Morso's spell. Every spell follows a mana path. So if you disrupt the mana, the magic breaks too. It's wild that Henry pulled that off. Teravon's working better than Henry expected. Now he can barely cut through a third-rank spell. Good thing he spent all those sleepless days training on the practice field. Looks like it's going to work. Morso's pissed that some lowly commoner dared to mess with his magic. Now that's a problem. If Morso loses, Varian's reputation will take a hit too. The instructor said Henry's defense technique was solid, but there's a limit to how many spells he can block back-to-back. Then he asked, what would Henry do if the opponent went all in on the offensive? To Morso, that sounded like a green light. The guy cast a ton of earth stones. Everyone's worried now. Henry could seriously get hurt. They can't figure out why the professor isn't stopping the duel. Morso's confident this will end the match and launches the piercing rocks of Bamir straight at our hero. Henry's got 11 stones flying at him. If he can't blink or cut through them, there's only one thing left to do. Block them all. No one could have imagined that Morso's strongest spell could get blocked so easily. Lecturer Varian is losing his mind. He's in trouble if Morso loses. Henry just wanted to copy something he saw in another match, and it worked. This technique's called stacking. Teravon's falling behind since maintaining the form takes way more mental strength, so his stamina drops hard after using it. And since the defense is weaker than when blocking a single object, it's tough to use in real combat. Good thing this is just a duel. The students are saying that with this kind of magical defense, Morso might actually lose. Dude's not going to handle being humiliated by some commoner. He's trying to cast another spell, but his turn's over. Varian's not stopping him, though. He actually wants Morso to keep going. The dude tells Henry to get ready because he's not letting this slide. But suddenly Jeremy speaks up to the professor. With a casual grin, he asks why Varian isn't letting Henry attack. The lecturer hesitated and started hearing the students gossiping about how Henry might get hurt bad and Varian's got no right to teach. The professor was so focused on the duel that he didn't even notice the students' reactions. He passed the turn to Henry, who broke Morso's magic shield again, knocking him to the ground. And just like that, our boy won. The S-class is turning out to be more impressive than the students expected. After such a rough duel, Jeremy gave Morso a proper punishment. Looks like his friend isn't doing so well. Wiping blood off his hands, he asked Verajane to keep an eye on Morso, saying he'd be upset if anything went wrong. The girl nodded and Jeremy left. Today he didn't call Morso a loyal subject. He called him a friend. In the Scalvan Empire, where heirs are chosen solely based on magical ability, Prince Jeremy became the heir, surpassing his brothers at the age of 12. The fact that Morso isn't his loyal subject anymore means the Dordens are done in the Empire's political scene. Not just Morso, but that commoner Henry caught Prince Jeremy's eye too. Now he won't have a peaceful life either. In class, all the students could talk about was Henry's bravery and how he was just trying to show off. But there's no denying it. He still beat Morso Dorden, even though Morso comes from a pretty powerful family in the Empire. No matter where you go, everyone's talking about Henry. Flame isn't seeking attention, but for some reason, she's not into it. Alchemy Professor Mason Tyron told everyone to focus. She said alchemy requires precise measurements and temperature control. Today, they're learning to make Tyron's fatigue potion. Man, Flame hates this. One screw up and it's all ruined. Alchemy's so exact, that's why she tries to avoid it. Professor Tyron scolded Flame for her carelessness and her habit of working alone. Potions are dangerous, after all. Flame knows Professor Mason's gonna snap and go crazy one day. To be ready, she's just gonna keep showing up to class. Suddenly, she heard someone laughing wickedly. She turned and saw Henry mixing something with curiosity. At first, Flame thought he took this class to get close to Azel, but it looks like Henry's just nuts. After a while, she finally finished, and there were 2 perfect potions on the table. Flame got lucky finishing so fast because her grades are solid. She glanced over at Azel, and thankfully she was doing fine. But in the original, Azel stumbled on Mayenna's magical blueprints. And in this class, she created a potion way better than Tyron's fatigue potion. Flame doesn't get why she's making a basic potion now. Her thoughts got interrupted by Professor Mason yelling at Henry for swapping out ingredients. He said he did it because it's more effective this way. But the professor snapped, saying that's not Tyron's fatigue potion, which is what she assigned them to make. Looks like Henry made the potion Azel was supposed to invent. Something's up. Professor Mason said he doesn't even listen and his behavior's just awful. That's why commoners don't belong here. In the original, she said, "That's why your family's in ruin." Those words hit the daughter of traitors who lost her family hard. Azel wasn't herself until she finished her potion. But what if Henry knew this and stepped in front of Professor Mason on purpose to protect Azel from that? Professor Mason's got a ton of influence in Stella. Rub her the wrong way once and it'll show up in your grades even in other classes. Flame doesn't get why this guy's going so hard for Azel. Meanwhile, the professor kept screaming about Henry's tone and demanded his parents see her ASAP. The hero was so focused on alchemy, he completely forgot about this annoying storyline. He said he's an orphan. Well, Henry's already neck-deep in trouble, so it is what it is. Oh yeah, he's got to try making a kimchi potion and a cola potion tomorrow. Weeks passed, but nothing changed. Professor Mason was still mad Henry kept using ingredients she hadn't even mentioned yet. But the hero insisted that tweaking her formula just a bit makes it better. Henry put on bulbul glasses to analyze Professor Mason. The Dark Demon's influence on her character was at 21%. She's got a complex and envy. Perfect, the plot's going just as planned. In Episode 8, the Dark Demon-possessed boss is Mason Tyron. She couldn't handle her negative emotions, got dark demonized, and became one of the villains. Once the Dark Demon's influence hits 90%, she'll fully turn into a monster. But until it gets past 50%, no magic can detect it. Henry can't prove she's a Dark Demon's follower and turn her in yet, so he'll have to keep provoking her. Once the progress passes 50%, he'll call the Dark Demon Assassin Squad. Regular Dark Demonization can be reversed before full transformation. But Mason's a Dark Demon contractor, meaning she made the deal willingly. The demonic seeds already bloomed in her, so there's no reversing it. The fourth episode hasn't even started yet, and we're already dealing with a strong boss. Henry's got to prepare in advance. If he doesn't act, she'll turn the students into dark demons and put Stella Academy in danger. The hero's behavior's still awful, and Professor Mason told him not to expect good grades in her class. Even better, the more attention on Henry, the less others will get hurt. But the hero didn't think the practical exam could turn into a group project. Looking at Henry's teammates, it felt like they were mourning. To lighten the mood, he smiled and introduced himself. His team included Azel and two guys, Michael and Jeff. Michael started crying, saying their group had no chance since Professor Mason gives bad grades to anyone she doesn't like. Now Henry's feeling guilty. But Azel jumped in, saying they can't just give up. She said the practical exam's graded by at least 3 alchemists from the Alchemy Castle, so there's no way Professor Mason can ruin their grades by herself. The team's sad faces turned into smiles. They're relieved and ready to give it their all. Henry smiled at Azel, but she just brushed him off. Either way, making a D-rank vitality potion shouldn't be a problem if they use everything they've learned so far. But they'll need to gather the best ingredients. Henry said he'd take care of the main ingredient, the fire lizard's tail. Azel reminded him that picking the right monster is key in alchemy, and they'll need something fresh. But Henry's feeling super confident, and Azel hopes she can trust him. The hero decided to order a fire lizard here. Professor Mason called one of the students over. She asked him to hand out the sheets to the first-year students in Group C's alchemy class. Everyone except Group 12. The practical exam in alchemy is judged by official alchemists from the Alchemy Castle. If that scumbag puts on a pathetic display, the alchemy path's over for good. Professor Mason's planning to show Henry the consequences of going against a teacher. This guy went to Flame at the training grounds and handed her a note from the alchemy professor. Professor Mason told him not to tell the other students, and Flame got what that meant. So Mason Tyron's only targeting Group 12 and Henry. She thinks Flame's just going to sit and do nothing. The notice said the practical exam assignment was changed. Instead of a vitality potion, they've got to make Tyron's indication potion. Flame thought that since Henry knew the original novel, he would prepare for this incident. He would not find the fire lizard tail needed for the life force potion, but the scales of the italic spiders for the Tyron indication potion. Flame had the opportunity to test this guy. Henry arrived at the Dairyville Stadium. Portals are cool and all, but every time he uses one, it leaves him dizzy. A girl greeted Henry, the mage. He said he's not officially a mage yet, just a student. The girl assured him that a student from Stella Academy deserves the same respect as a full-fledged mage. People passing by were also excited to see a Stella student. They'd never even seen their uniform before. The girl asked him to let her know if he needed any help. Apparently, with the Academy's badge and transit pass, people will treat him like an official mage anywhere he goes. Clearly, studying at Stella has its perks. Don't even get started on the free portal use, which normally costs 100,000 credits. Thanks to that, Henry was able to afford weekend trips to the city and confirmed that the info he had was mostly accurate. Today's target, a second-level fire lizard. Its endurance and strength are higher than most local beasts. To take it down, second-rank magic is required due to its high magic resistance and agility. Henry tested his skills on first-level monsters before, and it was pretty easy. He thinks he should be able to handle a second-level one, too. The fire lizards are here, and Henry drew his sword. Using his sixth sense, he detected where the attack would come from and pierced the monster's body. But there were more lizards waiting in the bushes. All right, time to gather some ingredients. Henry brought the loot back to his group to show them. It's super fresh, you can tell right away. Azel said it looks like he's got a good eye for ingredients. Now all that's left is to brew the perfect potion. Professor Mason asked if everyone was present. As she mentioned, today's exam will be conducted under the supervision of the Alchemy Castle's commission. If the students stand out here, it'll help their future careers as alchemists. And then she announced that the task for this exam is to brew a Tier B Tyron guidance potion. The students should have prepared all the necessary ingredients. Azel and her team were in shock. She said their assignment was to make a Tier D life force potion. Professor Mason replied that she had sent out notifications to all students about the exam topic change. Looking at the other students' tables, Azel saw that they had completely different ingredients prepared. So that's how the professor plans to run this. Henry couldn't care less, but it'll be rough if the others fail because of it. He wonders if this part was in the original novel. Flame doesn't get what's going on. She thought Henry was aware of the novel's events, but somehow he walked right into this trap. Azel timidly said she brought the wrong ingredients. Professor Mason said they neglected the main code of alchemists, bringing the right ingredients to uncover the truth. Team 12 doesn't stand a chance. But suddenly Henry stood up and asked if they just needed to brew the Tyron guidance potion. He declared that his team would make a better potion than the professors, using different ingredients, just like he always does. The teacher just laughed, saying the key ingredient of the Tyrant potion is italic spider scales. Italic spider scales are packed with nutrients. The Tyrant potion is made through thermal processing with those scales as the base. But Henry plans to use thermal additives from the fire lizard's tail instead. Well, Professor Misen thought, even better. She'd cut off Henry's alchemy path right here in front of everyone. Misen Tyrant agreed and said everyone would be given 1 hour to complete the task. The team told Henry he'd lost his mind. They doubted their ingredients would work, but he replied that since it's come to this, they've got no choice but to try. He asked them to trust him. Michael and Jeff agreed. Better to try something than get disqualified. The group was ready to show what they've got. Henry then started explaining his plan. Alchemy was one of his main hobbies in the game, so he wrote down every recipe, even the simplest ones. Of course, the Tier B Tyrant Guidance Potion recipe was among them. Initially, he didn't plan on brewing it since Professor Misen was supposed to develop it in the future, but here they are. Henry explained to his teammates that italic spider scales contain enough nutrients to allow the spiders to hatch their eggs safely. The scales are similar to the fire lizard's tail. He pointed to a blood vessel with his hand. They say tribal leaders of Alakar in the southern sands eat it to boost their health. It's also rumored that consuming this vessel increases lifespan, so it's worth trying to use it. Michael said he knows a bit about the Alakar tribe's processing method and asked to handle that part. Henry said the mulberry mistletoe needs to be dried using the desert mana release style. Jeff learned this manual method while traveling with his dad. It would take him 5 minutes to dry the blood vessels in that quantity. Azel would handle that part of the process. The locals were way more skilled than Henry expected. Now they just needed to combine everything as he instructed. Professor Misen was stunned when Team 12 presented her with their Tyrant Guidance Potion. Other members of the commission couldn't believe the kids pulled it off either. Misen didn't want to accept it. She'd been working on that formula for years. There's no way the students just made a potion better than hers on the spot. One woman from the commission said she'd evaluate it. She said the process wasn't fully optimized, and they used slightly too many ingredients. But even so, their potion was far more effective than Professor Misen's. Incredible. Oh, this younger generation. They've developed some truly unique skills. The professor demanded to see the potion herself, yelling. Taking it in her hands, there was no doubt. It used her method of sustaining human life force with monster-based nutrients. It was definitely a completed Tyrant Guidance Potion. Misen thought it was insane. How did the students produce a result that surpassed her creation just like that? But she was still the one handing out grades and could easily disqualify the students for using the wrong ingredients. The other commission members interrupted her, saying even an A+ wouldn't do this work justice. Professor Misen was furious but couldn't argue with these old ladies, so reluctantly she announced that Team 12 passed. Still, Professor Misen swore she'd make Henry pay. The Dark Demon's influence advanced further. After class, the group was training on the range. Flame was relieved they finally wrapped it up. After school, her whole body aches, at her age too. She overheard some girls encouraging Arshuin, saying she's still doing better than the princess. Flame had heard of her. She's a genius among fire mages. But Arshuin was worried that Monica was improving so fast while she'd spent years perfecting her skills. Pretty soon, the princess would surpass her. Flame knew Monica's fire control level was supposed to improve in her second year, but she's already advancing now. Maybe Henry's involved in this too. The practical alchemy exam went weird as well. The Tier B Tyrant Guidance Potion formula was supposed to be developed by Azel in the future, then taken over and completed by Professor Misen. Henry somehow knew a recipe that hadn't even appeared in the novel, and he acted like he didn't know this incident would happen. Wait, the guy knows things from the future but isn't familiar with the original novel's plot. Flame figured he must have regressed rather than reincarnated into a character like she did. That makes sense. If he came back from the future, he'd remember random things from there but wouldn't necessarily know about the small predicaments Azel got into. In the novel's storyline, Mitch once got a chance to go back in time, from the only being in this world with power over time, the 11th moon of the Silver Age. Liam walked up to Flame and asked what she was thinking about. She immediately ran over and asked his opinion on Henry. Liam didn't know why she was asking, but just said Henry's a weird student, that's all. Flame asked if he thought Henry was different in any other way, but Liam hadn't noticed anything like that. Suddenly, he asked if Flame was interested in the guy. She hesitantly said yes. Apparently, Henry knows about the original novel's events just like her. Suddenly, Flame decided she can't just sit still. Standing still isn't her style at all. Since she's here, she'll open her heart to Henry. The phrase is a play on words. Flame wants to share her thoughts. Liam misunderstood and was shocked, thinking she meant she'd confess her feelings to Henry. The next day, Henry was sitting in the cafeteria wondering what's going to happen next. Right now, the progress of the Dark Demon's influence on Tyrion was at 37%. That means the next incident will happen within 3 months. The Dark Demon's influence over Maizen randomly targets one of the students. Specifically, there are 3 candidates: Flame's friend, Jackie, Monica's support group member, Arshuan, and the heir to the Full Moon Tower, Liam. Worst case scenario, it'll hit him. Even though stuff like this was super rare in the game, if the Dark Demon's influence gets to the Full Moon Tower heir, it's big trouble. It almost always leads to a bad ending. Walking out of the cafeteria, Henry was trying to figure out who the most likely candidate was when he suddenly ran into Flame. She said he still didn't give her a straight answer about who he really is last time. Here we go again. Flame's just making everything more complicated. Telling her the whole truth and getting some info from her could actually help him reach the true ending. Since Henry's got nothing to lose, maybe he should just do it? But then a bunch of warnings popped up around him, telling him not to reveal his transmigration and not to share info with a key character. This is driving him nuts. He's got to think of something else. So Henry told Flame they both clearly had secrets they didn't want to share, and suggested they just keep things surface level. Luckily, it worked, and she agreed. Flame started off by asking if he knew the future. Dude literally said surface level, and she's already coming in guns blazing. If she's asking about that, she probably knows something too. So now Henry asked what she was trying to achieve by studying at this academy. She said she wanted to prevent the collapse of this world since it's super unstable. That's cool, but Henry couldn't tell if she was lying or not. Then Flame asked why he acts the way he does. Henry decided to stick to vague answers and said it's just better for everyone this way. That should have been enough, but Flame pushed back, saying there's no way someone could be that selfless. She's convinced Henry's got some kind of goal and has to be benefiting from all this somehow. But he kept telling her he didn't. Actually, even he doesn't really know what he wants. And then Henry straight up said he just wants to survive. That did the trick. Flame apologized for crossing the line. She started crying and ran off. Dang, now it's his turn to ask questions. Out of nowhere, Liam showed up with a scary look on his face, asking why Flame left in tears. The dude said if Henry lies, he won't let it slide. Wow, having the top-tier guy in this world glare at you like that is straight up terrifying. Henry totally forgot Liam's got an unrequited crush on Flame. Things are going to get messy if there's a misunderstanding, so Henry decided to come clean. He reassured Liam that nothing happened between him and Flame. Liam wasn't buying it at first, but Henry doubled down, saying there really wasn't anything for Liam to worry about. Hopefully that'd be enough. Liam went quiet, then apologized for the pointless question. He calmly turned and walked off. Weird. Liam was a totally different kind of character in the original. The super chill, cool-as-a-cucumber Liam from the game is acting all unstable. Something about this is throwing Henry off. Meanwhile, Azel was trying to study but couldn't focus. After that alchemy lesson, she went up to Henry with a question. She wanted to know about that mixing method and asked if he seriously came up with it on the spot. Henry had said mostly yeah. Azel always thought of herself as a genius and believed that if she kept working hard, she'd surpass her professor. She really believed that, but now who even is she after all this? At this rate, she'll never get revenge for her dad. On those filthy, disgusting Adalabits who turned her father into a traitor and had him executed. Azel can't just let that go. She's got to work even harder. Flame moved into a 4-person room because she liked being around all the buzz. But if she knew it would be like this, she definitely would have picked her own private room for S-class students. Henry flat out told her he doesn't have a specific goal. That pretty much confirms his regression. In the last part of the original novel, the 11th moon of the Silver Age told Mitch he could turn back time, but the price for it would be losing most of his memories. And once the mission was completed, his existence would be erased. No one would remember he saved the world. Even his loved ones would forget him. The moon asked him if he still wanted to go back and walk this path again. Mitch agreed, saying if that's his fate, so be it. But Azel stopped him. She said she'd rather die remembering him than live in a world without him. So they decided to face the end together. Her words convinced him, and Mitch gave up on regression. And so in the epilogue, the world was destroyed. Flame thought that if this world was really going off the rails from the original novel, and Henry used the power of the 11th moon to regress, then once he completed his mission, he'd disappear, and every trace of him would be wiped from the world. But on the flip side, the guy who should have lost most of his memories and been left with just one goal in mind said he just wants to survive. Suddenly, Jackie burst into Flame's room, yelling that Liam was here to see her. He was waiting for her on the first floor of the dorm. but Flame told her to say she wasn't there. Jackie tried to convince her, but the answer was still a firm no. Jackie went down and approached Liam, but he didn't even know who she was. He only cared about where Flame was. Jackie said she wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. Liam was surprised she was so down just because some third-rate student rejected her feelings. He sighed and left. Jackie has such strong feelings for Liam, but he can't even remember her name. It's always been like that. All the talent, all the attention from everyone around them, everything always went to Flame. Even Liam's heart. Jackie clenched her fist. She's so done with all of this. At the first main tower, Professor Misen was getting chewed out for being humiliated by a student, and she had no excuses. The Academy's deputy director, Aki Hayden, said she should know full well that a lot is expected of her. He asked if the research on the convergence methodology of random sequences, which she was conducting with the doctors of the Lunar Shadow Order, was progressing successfully. The woman said she wouldn't disappoint him. Aki Hayden was counting on her. Professor Misen walked out of his office and he called her an idiot. She doesn't even realize she's being used. All that glory has completely blinded Misen Tyran. It's laughable that a warrior meant to fight against demonic humans is conducting research for them instead. Aki Hayden couldn't wait for the day when the development of magical alchemy and engineering would finally be complete. Meanwhile, Henry was helping Altalesia carry a heavy stack of papers. She thanked him since, without his help, Professor Misen would have blown up at her again. Man, the professor's office was a total disaster zone. Then Henry noticed one of the formulas. Altalesia said Professor Misen was working on it with the doctors. Apparently, they called it the convergence methodology of random sequences. Henry knew that this was the first formula for magical alchemy and engineering. In the episode where Professor Misen gets corrupted, the demons help her finish the formula. But their superior technical skills lead to catastrophic results. But with Altalesia in the picture, things could change. What if she solved this problem before the dark demonic humans entered the storyline? Henry turned to the assistant. She thought he was about to ask her to get him some coffee. But instead, Henry asked if it annoyed Altalesia that Professor Misen was always giving her such a hard time. The girl was surprised he'd asked something like that out of nowhere. Henry said he could suggest an easy plan to give her what she deserves. Altalesia said she's just a regular assistant. How could she even think about paying someone back? If she got fired, she'd end up living on the streets. But the hero offered her an alternative. Become a better alchemist than Professor Misen. That way, no one would be able to push her around. The girl smiled, saying that would be nice. She's already so tired. There's no way she's okay with doing dirty work in a dusty storage room that Misen dumps on her. Altalesia dreams of becoming an alchemist, creating tons of inventions, and she has the talent to make that dream come true. So one day, she's going to be the greatest alchemist of her generation, inventing countless items and bringing all kinds of innovations to life. Of course, reality hasn't let her yet, so she's had to put her dream on hold. But soon, Henry's going to turn that dream into reality. When the first week of exams at Stella ended, he started stopping by Altalesia's place regularly. She said she's been wanting to add a button that lets you change the color of a pen. Henry suggested adding an eraser to it, like on mechanical pencils. Nice. Altalesia's inventions were getting better and better, but her formula calculations were still a mess. Henry needed to guide the young genius to the right answer before Misen Tyran got to him. But it wasn't easy. Flame asked the old man what he was daydreaming about and told him he'd run into something if he kept zoning out. Henry didn't get what old man she was talking about. Obviously, she meant him. Flame's definitely been talking to him a lot more than before. She showed up just in time. Henry asked if she remembered her friend Jackie. Flame immediately started overthinking, but the hero hadn't even said anything yet. Henry advised her to keep an eye on her. Jackie might be a little off right now. If she's under the influence of a dark demon, she's going to be super unstable. Flame didn't get any of it, but she said she'd be going hunting with Jackie this weekend, so she'd keep an eye on her there. It's obvious where they're going. The location where Episode 4 starts, the Martivas Cemetery. All the main characters, including Mitch, Azel, and Flame, are going to be there. It's going to be a big battle with a 5th-ranked Necromancer showing up. Of course, Henry wasn't planning to mess with the storyline, but snagging the secret reward from there would really help during the familiar contract ceremony. The hero handed Mr. Hillman his application. There were training sessions. The professor told Henry he wasn't going to learn much about fencing or the Stella Code of Honor. Henry noticed Mitch's time-off request on the table. He figured he should check it out just in case. Henry said a lot of students were asking for time off to go hunting. Mr. Hillman replied that they were probably headed to Martivas Cemetery to rack up points. Just as Henry thought, Mitch and Liam have such high scores, but they're still working so hard. But no, the professor said Mitch had taken time off to go home. And Liam would be going with Flame, but there's no way they'll be able to handle the Necromancer without Mitch. Henry didn't know what had gotten into that guy. He'd never leave without a good reason. But the current team definitely couldn't handle a 5th-ranked Necromancer. No way. What was the hero supposed to do? Without solid proof, he couldn't request support. And because of narrative restrictions, he couldn't relay the exact information. But Henry couldn't just let them die. He had no choice. He'd have to handle this himself. A few days later, students were already hunting at the cemetery. A second-year Gabby smirked, saying those level 2 Dangerfish predictors only took 1 hit. Another second-year, Kasif Derek, yelled at him for destroying everything in sight and ignoring orders. A second-year girl, Ban Dien, told Azel to forget about him. It's like talking to a brick wall, and it'd just tire her out. Ban Dien told her not to stress over those guys. The boys told her to watch her mouth around the newbie. Azel had joined them because their club had an open spot and allowed special leave. And honestly, they seemed like decent people, which was a relief. Dien called for Azel to move along, but they heard some noise. It sounded like someone was fighting intensely nearby. It wouldn't be good if their hunting zones overlapped, so Dien suggested they go say hi. And that's when they saw it was Monica and Flame. Monica says she was the first to shoot the fish, but Flame snaps back that it's their hunting ground, so it's theirs. It's a big fortune-telling fish. It's classified as level 3 dangerous, and finding one isn't easy, as Azel's heard. Seems like they're arguing over who gets more points. If Azel and her crew step in, it's going to be trouble. Plus, she has zero interest in dealing with the little sister of the guy who killed her dad. Azel wanted to bounce, but Derek suggested the girls chill and let the senior decide what's up. Monica told him to shut it and get lost. The guy got ticked off at how she talked to someone older, but the princess told him to act his age if he's really a senior. Out of nowhere, the ground started shaking, and there was noise. Arms and legs started coming out of the ground. A whole group of skeletons popped up in front of them. Meanwhile, Henry was leveling up his skills at the cemetery, too. He really wants to use magic, but all he's got is this weak blink spell. Soon the dude's gonna run into something big, and he found just the spot. Henry doesn't have any OP skills or crazy powers to wipe out an army of skeletons like Mitch does, so there's only one way to survive. He's got to fight like only players can. Episode 4, Attack of the Necromancer, just kicked off. Out of the ground rose a general commanding hundreds of skeletons. There are only 3 of these semi-boss generals in this episode. With Henry's current skills, if he fights them the usual way, he's dead meat. Obviously, he doesn't plan to fight fair. Henry started wailing on the general, yelling for it to crawl back underground. Watching monsters transform or get summoned is such a cliche, but wasting time like that ain't gonna get the win. Henry made a spine staff out of the general. With it, he gets command over the skeletons. Time to roll out. Flame totally forgot this was the Necromancer episode, but something's off. As far as she remembers, Mitch is supposed to clear this episode, so why's Azel here with these guys, and where the hell is Mitch? It's insane they'll have to face a rank 5 Necromancer with this team. Liam sent an SOS to Stella Academy through his watch and said they just need to hold out against the skeletons until backup shows up. The professors from Stella will help if they can hang on a bit longer. Even if they can't beat the Necromancer, they can still get out alive. Monica yelled that this ain't the time to be chatting. They're in a graveyard. The longer they wait, the more skeletons will spawn. They need to hustle back to camp. A skeleton was about to attack Jackie, but Azel swooped in and took it out just in time. The girl was super scared, but it's all good now. Gabby said the new girl's not bad. That Necromancer must have planned this for a while. Azel figures he probably used the mana vessel technique. With that trick, a Necromancer can steadily store and maintain mana. Necromancers have a cap on mana. If they just summoned monsters, they'd run out after like 10 skeletons of rank 3 or 4. But to cover such a huge area, more and more skeletons keep showing up. Gabby said it looks like this was in the works for a long time. Are they trying to kill the crew and turn them into skeleton mages? Kasif's the leader here, so he's got to show the group something. He decided to use some heavy magic and end it all at once. But then one of the skeletons grabbed his leg. Gabby saved his buddy from the monster. The problem is, Kasif didn't finish casting the spell. Now everything's backfiring. Gabby yelled for everyone to hit the deck. If this thing blows, it's taking everyone out. The skeletons just keep piling up. This isn't how it's supposed to go. Flame's at her limit. The group can't keep fighting. She's out of mana and there's no time to recharge. Another skeleton jumped Flame. She thought this was it for her. But suddenly all the skeletons froze. Behind them, Henry appeared, holding the general's skull in his hands. Flame knows the general's way stronger than the regular skeletons, and he's guarded by elites. It's hard to believe the guy took him down solo. Either way, Flame's safe now. When the group got their bearings, they started thanking Henry for the save. But Azel couldn't help wondering how he got the general's head. The dude said he pulled it out of a pile of bones. No need for them to know he ambushed it at its spawn point. All right, they've got to come up with a plan fast. It'll get real bad when the Necromancer realizes he can't rely on his generals and starts controlling the skeletons himself. On the way here, Henry saw the Necromancer was camped out near the main base, so there's no way to escape the trap. There's only one option: take down the boss. That shocked everyone. They'd learned in class that necromancers use insane magic, but physically they're nothing special. But he's surrounded by an insane amount of guards. Henry said the guy's already summoned a massive army, and if they don't hit him now, they'll never escape. Right now, the necromancer's guard includes 1 general, 6 elite skeletons, and 50 regular soldiers. The longer they wait, the bigger the army gets. This is their one shot, but they need to convince everyone. Suddenly, Flame said they can do it. Henry might look kind of dumb, but he's got combat experience. Monica's in too, since she doesn't see any other way out of this. Plus, the Necromancer won't expect them to go on the offensive. Gabby and Dean aren't sure where the others are getting this confidence, but they can't survive alone, so they're in. Dean said they need to try everything before the Necromancer figures it out. The Dark Tower Mage, rank 5 Necromancer William, thinks he just got lucky running into the rookies from Stella. Once he turns them into skeleton mages, those bastards from the Dark Demon Alliance won't be able to look down on him anymore. William spent 7 years filling his mana vessel, and now he's got 700 corpses ready to go. He's done with everyone laughing at him. But his connection suddenly broke. That means the general was taken out. The heroes charged straight in. The bone wall William created with 4th rank magic cracked. The necromancer screamed that these punks won't leave here alive, but he already got hit by a fire blast. William let his guard down. He never thought kids would attack him first. Even though they're just rookies, they're still from Stella. He hadn't planned on using this, but a direct fight's too risky. He cut his finger and started summoning elite warriors with blood magic. William overdid it with the skeleton summoning, and his insides took a hit, but it should be enough. He ordered his warriors to stop these idiots. The necromancer thought he could finally relax, but Henry was already standing next to him. William was watching the Stella students through the skeleton's eyes, but somehow this dude snuck up on him. In Henry's hands, he saw his general. The guy just threw him on the ground and started smashing him to pieces. Blood started dripping from William's mouth, and he was gasping for air. William really underestimated Stella's true power. Things aren't going as planned. Gabby and Bandine were supposed to take out the generals and back up Henry. But with the extra elite skeletons, they're still tied up. Looks like Henry's got to fight this one out solo, and he's the weakest one here. He thought about just bolting, but he noticed the necromancer wasn't in great shape either. William had overdone it with summoning those elite skeletons, messing himself up internally. Henry figured he might have a shot. Monica's in deep trouble. She's got to handle these freaks quick and link up with Henry. Jackie screamed to the princess that it's bad. Henry's stuck one-on-one with the necromancer. He's a 1st rank mage going up against a 5th rank necromancer. Talk about a losing battle. If Henry dies, Monica swore she'd dig him up just to bury him again. William tried trapping him in some bone prison, but Henry dodged it just in time. Henry already guessed the necromancer would throw up some bone wall around himself, so he came prepared with a stash of cola potions that melt bones perfectly. Bone barrier down. William launched bone spears next. Henry figured this was the perfect moment to charge in while the necromancer was distracted. But the guy wasn't dumb. One of those bone spears skewered Henry's leg all the way through. William felt flattered seeing how wrecked Henry looked. Even though the necromancer was worn down, 5th rank was still 5th rank. Still, Henry could see that even at that level, the dude wasn't invincible. William was pretty much out of steam. One more push and Henry might actually win, but thinking straight through all that pain wasn't easy. At this rate, he wouldn't be able to pull off his blink break. Henry waited for William to make a move. Then he made a slight lunge, dragging himself across the ground. William laughed, mocking how gracefully he was running away. Henry pushed through the pain and crawled just a little further. William taunted, saying resistance was pointless and he'd finish the guy off right there. But Henry already knew he had this in the bag. The distance between them was 13 meters. At this range, he wouldn't need to use blink break. That's how he got close enough to the necromancer when the dude least expected it. And then he drove his sword straight into the guy's chest. Right after that, all the skeletons the others were fighting started falling apart. That's how they knew Henry took out the necromancer. Everyone's safe and sound now. Henry's beat and just wants to go home. Later, the magical knights of Stella escorted them back to school. Henry told Mr. Hillman he'd been planning to train up in the mountains for the fresh air, But the graveyard air wasn't exactly top tier. The hero apologized, but according to Academy rules, points would still be deducted, no exceptions. However, Mr. Hillman noted that the fact Henry rushed in to save his teammates without worrying about breaking the rules was commendable. He'd be getting a proper reward and points eventually, so he just had to hang tight. The professor walked off. They told Henry his legs would need a few days to recover, so he better rest up. As he was about to leave, Isel approached him and thanked him for today. Henry told her she could pay him back by treating him to dinner sometime. She went quiet, so Henry decided to head back to the dorm, but Isel suddenly asked if she'd be able to reach Henry's level if she really worked at it. This isn't good. In the original, she never asked questions like this. It must be because Henry got involved and threw things off course. Isel faced challenges but never had a chance to overcome them. Henry told her she shouldn't ask him that because she's already reached levels most people think are impossible. Isel asked how he could know that. Well, it's because he's been watching her. And in that moment, Henry realized he sounded like a stalker. He decided to leave quick before she started thinking he was some kind of creep. But for Isel, it meant something entirely different. Nobody cared about the life of a trader's daughter, and here was this guy saying he'd been watching her. The words impressive results really hit home for her. Later, everyone gathered in the Academy courtyard. Henry would have never believed that the Faculty of Magic, the Magic Tower, and even a bunch of nobles would show up for some award ceremony. It all seemed way too over the top. Either way, Monica was practically glowing with excitement. Mr. Hillman stepped up to the podium and called for silence. Today, they were recognizing 12 brave students who went up against the forces of the Dark Demon Order, and these awards were going to be handed out by the headmaster himself. That's right, the strongest human alive. Magister of 9th rank magic, Eltman Eltwin, was 300 years old and always had this friendly smile on his face. Meanwhile, he was the most powerful magic warrior with the devastating title, the Exterminator. The headmaster patted Gabby on the shoulder and said they all did an outstanding job. He hoped they'd keep working hard in the future. Then he walked over to Henry. The pressure from just one look was unreal. So that's what 9th rank mages, only 10 of them in the world, are like. But Henry couldn't let himself look away now. Eltman Eltwin broke into a smile, saying that even here Henry was as diligent as ever, just as the headmaster had hoped. And with that, the award ceremony was over, leaving Henry wondering what that even meant. Henry got 5 million credits as a reward. Now he doesn't have to worry about cash for a while. He also got a pose vessel, basically the Necromancer's heart. It's going to be a pain for now, but soon Altalicia will develop subspace, and carrying stuff around will get way easier. Although first, she'll have to figure out the random sequence convergence problem. Good thing the other students handed their rewards over to Henry. Now it's time for system rewards. Since the hero continued the story in a unique way, he's offered an extra reward aside from experience. A nerfed version of an in-game item, a nerfed version of an in-game skill, or bonus experience. It's a tough call, but Henry decides to convert the experience into the blink skill. That's what he needs most right now. The hero realized just how weak he was in this fight. Working hard like everyone else won't cut it. He's got to use his knowledge to get as far as possible. The blink skill hit its experience cap and ranked up. Now he can finally use blink 3 times in a row. That means Henry can use it a bit more without overdoing it. All right, next up is Isel. She's in meditation class right now, exploring the abyss. A voice woke her up, saying magic wasn't allowed during meditation. She looked up and saw several floating ice chunks. Isel didn't remember making them, but she didn't use any techniques or formulas. Looks like the other students didn't notice anything. Even if it's first-rank magic, they still should have felt the mana flow before the casting. If this is really an effective meditation, that guy must have seen it coming. Class ended. Thanks to the reward, Isel can now afford a red bean paste bun for 1,500 credits, so she's pretty hyped. But her snack break got interrupted by Jeremy. He asked if she'd joined any clubs yet. She said not yet, so he offered her a spot in his. Isel immediately asked about the terms. Jeremy said he just liked her and wanted her in his crew. Yeah, right. He's hitting on her to turn her into a trophy. Jeremy could tell she didn't buy it. He swore he wasn't putting any conditions on it. She just had to join his club and stick around and he'd take care of her. Isel had to know who he was. Oh, she knew better than anyone. The Skalvan Empire had tense relations with the Adalabit Kingdom, so under Prince Jeremy's influence, Isel's rough life could turn around. She wouldn't have to get excited over some cheap bun anymore or deal with the humiliation of being a trader's daughter. Isel knew it was a bad idea, but she was about to agree. Suddenly, Flame ran up and slapped her. She yelled at Azel, saying she thought they were going to handle this together, but here she was secretly flirting with guys. Flame confessed her feelings and said now Azel was just going to ditch her like that. Azel was totally lost. Flame grabbed her hand and dragged her off to talk. Once they were gone, the main character sighed with relief. Whatever Azel thought, she needed to be grateful. If she'd turned Jeremy down without a reason, he would have crushed her. Flame apologized for the slap and left. Azel had no idea what just happened. Flame thought she did the right thing. If Azel had joined his crew like in the novel, Jeremy would have crushed her spirit with extra care. If possible, Flame didn't want to mess up the original events. But after seeing Henry, she figured she wasn't wrong. The main thing was making sure Jeremy didn't figure out she'd made all this up. Meanwhile, Jeremy was sipping tea in his room. Everything Flame said to try and pull Azel away from him was an obvious lie. She's more interesting, way more than Azel, now Jeremy wants her. Today there's going to be a discussion about the next assignment for the students. Unlike before, they won't be facing level 1 or level 2 danger monsters. This time the targets are level 3 monsters. The task is all about strategy. The students will split into teams, analyze all the available info about the monster, and take it down tactically. Since they'll have to take out a mid-level monster, they'll get some prep time. The students already have the geography and habitat data for the Academy's training grounds. So, they need to pick the one that suits their team best. This time, the professors are mixing S&A classes, and the exam will take place in 4 days. Mr. Hillman told them to form teams of up to 6 people and hand in their lists. Azel hates group assignments. She watches the girls arguing, trying to get on Monica's team. Azel's surroundings used to be like that before Adalabit destroyed her family. They were equals once. The Grand Duchy of Malf with its ice element and the Adalabit royal family with their fire element. Back then, those two houses kept each other in check, splitting the magic world between them. Then 2 geniuses were born, Monica and Azel. At that time, Azel thought she was chosen, but now, in her current state, she's not sure if she can even take revenge on Adalabit. Henry walked up to Azel and asked if she was alone. He offered to team up. Monica turned around, confused why he was with that girl. Henry said there was no minimum team size, so he suggested making a 2-person team and getting a bonus for it. Azel thought he'd lost his mind. How were the 2 of them supposed to handle a level 3 monster? But Henry just smiled and asked if she agreed. The girl sighed and nodded. She didn't really have anyone else to team up with anyway. Then Henry went off to turn in their list. Suddenly, Monica stormed over with a nasty look. Azel figured she was scared to compete with her, but the princess said it was ridiculous. She just told Azel to behave herself since it was like giving pearls to a pig. Looks like Monica isn't afraid of Azel's abilities at all. She's worried about Henry. The princess is pissed that Azel thinks she'll lose to some loser and a commoner. Even a team of her usual lackeys would do, but it'd be way better to pull in the knight everyone says is the best of the best. So Monica walked over to Mitch and asked if he had a team yet. The guy said he was planning to handle everything solo. The princess suggested teaming up with her. Mitch asked why. Monica pointed at Henry and Azel, saying they'd already formed a team, and she didn't think they were going for a mid-level monster, more like a mid-large special monster. So Monica repeated her offer to team up. Mitch smirked. Sounds fun. He'd been wanting to compete with Henry at least once. This time, Monica is dead set on outdoing our hero and Azel. And after 4 days of prep, the class assessment exam for A and S classes began. The 16th group chose a mug rake, a mid-level monster that's pretty easy to beat overall. Flame's doing fine. She's been practicing for this day. The idea of earning bonus points by hitting a monster with an element opposite to its attribute? That's way out of reach for her. Just like fighting a mid-large special monster. But if she can solo a level 3 monster, she'll get the highest score. On average, beating a mid-level 1-star monster takes 5 first-class mages. But if you add compatibility, experience, and environmental factors, you can handle monsters a few levels higher. For Flame, though, as a light mage with almost 0 compatibility, there's not much choice. Whatever the case, she hopes Azel pulls through. In the original story, Azel couldn't team up with anyone because of Monica and ended up with the lowest score. Flame even thought about asking her to join her team, but since Henry's with her, her story's bound to take a better turn. The 16th group did well, and now it's Flame's turn. She walked past Henry and Azel, but slipped on her untied laces. Our hero caught her by the back of her coat. Flame thanked him, and Henry told her to tie her shoes. Everything was fine when Jackie tied them for her. Flame wouldn't have been so lucky if she'd walked onto the field like that. She climbed onto the platform herself and prepared her staff. The students were curious how she planned to solo that giant boar. It didn't have any special attributes, so there was no point in attacking it with opposites. The battle started, and the monster charged. Using the Whispering Blossoms on the wind spell, Flame immobilized the boar. Next, after modifying the material, icy spikes sprouted from the branches. But that wasn't enough to stop the monster. Flame took a few seconds to charge up and pierced the boar through with a beam of light. Now everyone knows not to mess with her. Some people couldn't even take down a mid-level monster with 5 people. Flame didn't even get a chance to relax before the next team, Monica and Mitch, stepped onto the field. The crowd was hyped, shouting and cheering for the princess. Flame couldn't figure out why Monica was working with Mitch and not someone from her crew. In the original story, those two didn't even cross paths. By Mitch and Monica's request, a mid-level special monster, a fishfolk, was summoned. Summoning such a rare monster just to fight it? That's impressive, as expected of the princess. Flame knows this isn't just some random special mid-level monster. Monica and Mitch's attributes are fire, earth, and lightning. The fishfolk is a water element monster, strong against fire, and on top of that, it can fly. This monster is the complete opposite, not just of Monica, but Mitch too. They're going up against a monster everyone else failed to beat, and they're even ignoring elemental advantages. They're aiming for the max score, but they can only get that score if they win. The monster activated, and Monica told Mitch to start. Everyone thought they'd attack immediately, but the swordsman stood behind the mage. With one leap, Mitch launched himself into the air. His power jump is pretty solid for a first year. But Bondine said he wouldn't be able to reach the fishfolk with just that. You can't use another power jump mid-air. What's Mitch thinking? He created a small earth platform under his feet and used fire to jump again. With a giant strike, he caught the monster and slammed it into the ground. Summoned earth mounds pinned the fishfolk down even harder. It broke free without much trouble, but it was already too late. The princess finished her spell. A powerful burst of fire tore through the monster's body. Even with its strong resistance to fire, the fishfolk was in agony. The finishing blow came from Mitch's lightning strike, reducing the monster to ash. And that's how the fight ended. The fishfolk didn't even get a single attack in. This year's freshmen are insane. They might actually hit the level of that guy from S-Class. That's what it means to be a genius. Monica's confident that with results like these, it doesn't matter what monster Henry picks. He won't surpass her. This time, the win is hers. Next up are Henry and Azel. Our hero asks the announcers to summon 5 of the same monsters. Everyone held their breath, trying to process what they just heard. 5 people can barely handle one mid-level monster, and these 2 are going up against 5 of them? The students had heard all kinds of things about the guy, but clearly this Henry dude is a total lunatic. The summoning was complete, and now the whole field was swarming with monsters. Among them was one like the Himmerodon, the Sandmane Black Bull, Caden the Nami Slime, and a hypersensitive bat. This is one insane combo. Monica asked Mitch if he got what was happening. He's curious to see what Henry has planned. Everyone's on the edge of their seats. Mr. Hillman asked who came up with this monster selection. It was Henry. The professor said he's a knight, so he might score points even in this extreme situation, but no mage could handle this. He couldn't help but think this plan was way too harsh on the bishop. But Henry replied that the strategy was specifically designed for the bishop. In that case, Mr. Hillman told them to begin. Azel had her mana ready, and Henry just told her to trust him. The girl still had no clue what was going on in his head. A couple of days ago during prep, Azel asked why her. A knight like Henry, with his skills, could have teamed up with literally anyone else. As she pointed out, there are tons of insanely talented students around. No mage matches Monica's firepower, and nobody can touch Flame's level of control. Mitch, hands down the strongest freshman, no question. A few others are solid in one-on-one fights and would have been great partners for Henry too. Yet Azel asked again, why her? Henry just said he figured she was the best pick for his team, plain and simple. Azel still doesn't get what he meant, but there's got to be a reason he chose her. Well, if that's the case, she's going to prove he made the right call. She started an ethereal resonance. No way, that phenomenon only happens when a 6th-rank mage or higher fully enters their subconscious world. At their peak concentration, a backflow might occur, unleashing all their mana, and she's pulling this off as a freshman? Azel really does deserve the title Winter Sovereign. All right, time to execute the plan to take down 5 mid-level monsters. Using his blink skill, Henry closed in on the Himmerodon and slashed it with his sword. That monster's out of commission for now. Next up, the Sandmane Black Bull. The bull's eyes locked onto the red horn of the Himmerodon. Perfect, everything's going according to plan. The method to fight 5 mid-level monsters at once? Get them to take each other out. And just like that, it started happening, the last thing anyone in the audience expected. Making your enemies fight each other? That's called the borrowed knife strategy. Don't waste your energy when you can use someone else's knife to do the job. Etherworld veterans once brainstormed how to take out hordes of monsters with small teams. After tons of trials, they came up with a method. Use the monster's traits and attributes against them. Step 1. Henry attacks the Himmerodon. When it takes damage, its horn turns red. This triggers the Black Bull's natural aggression. Agitated, the bull releases sand from its body, scattering it everywhere. And when that sand hits the Nami slime, it starts producing a ton of water to keep itself from drying out. Perfect! No one's getting flooded thanks to the exam zone's barrier. Then Caden picks up on the moisture and screams at a pitch of, like, the 7th octave or higher, which finally sets off the hypersensitive bat with its crazy hearing. So yeah, these monsters aren't getting along at all. Turns out, Henry knows the exact quirks of every monster he picked. Even the professors who've taken monster study courses couldn't have thought of this. But what's blowing everyone's minds even more is Azel Malf's focus. In the middle of all this chaos, she's keeping her mana steady like it's nothing. Azel fully trusts her knight. Caden soared above her, ready to strike. Henry blinked in, drove the monster away, and kept shielding her from all kinds of threats. Mitch asked Monica about Henry, wondering if she thinks he's the perfect knight, the kind that protects his princess. Meanwhile, Azel was completely submerged in her own mind. She gathered enough energy and mana to create a crystalline flower. The icy energy was dazzling. It was a masterpiece. Then she commanded the flower to shatter into pieces. This dealt heavy damage to the monsters, freezing them instantly. The audience thought it was over and that this duo really beat 5 mid-level monsters on their own. But just a few seconds later, the monsters began to stir. Guess it wasn't enough to finish them off. What a shame. No time to dwell on it, though, because Azel's charging up her next spell. There was a massive explosion that rocked everything around. Now Azel knows what she's capable of. Just like Henry said. At first, she thought he was crazy for wanting to take on 5 monsters at once and even said so. But the hero told her she could do it, and he believed in her. So she had to believe in him, too. Up until now, she had nothing. No belief in her purpose and no one who truly supported or recognized her path. But that's all changed. Now a light guides Azel's way. She won't have to wander in the dark anymore. The group's skill assessment is done, and a smile blooms on Azel's face. Henry almost got caught in the explosion. Probably should have warned him first, then cast the spell. Based on the trial exam results, Henry and Azel are first with 199 points, while Mitch and Monica are second with 137 points. The princess says they got outclassed in every way. Losing, even after beating 2 special mid-level monsters with clashing attributes, means they've got to admit defeat. Monica's deep in thought. What if Henry had been her knight? Maybe then she could have showcased magic on Azel's level too. But why is this commoner so fixated on Azel? If there's such a thing as the perfect knight in this world, it'd make way more sense for him to serve Monica, the one destined to be the perfect queen. She'd be lying to herself if she said she was fine with this. No way she's cool with it, let alone understands it. Monica's got to dig deeper into who Henry really is. As she was about to leave, she caught Saren Orkin staring at her, probably here to gloat about how Monica lost to a team made up of a commoner and a traitor. When the princess left, Siren said Monica's got a lot to learn. Who would have thought Azel mastered the crystal bloom this early? That spell only became her signature way later, once she truly believed in herself, after going through hell and back. In the original storyline, Azel's supposed to face a downward spiral from here, but now she's showing off the crystal bloom in front of everyone, all thanks to Henry, probably. In the novel, Mitch and Azel confess their feelings for each other while the world falls apart. But what if there's another plotline Flame doesn't know about? Like, what if a side character, say Henry, loves Azel, and during the catastrophe he chose to regress instead of Mitch? This regression would let him create a world where his love survives. Even if the person he loves most wouldn't remember him, would Henry really not regret it in the end? Love so strong it made him rewind time at the cost of his existence in this world. Flame wonders what that must feel like. Episode 5 wraps up, and Henry gets offered another bonus reward. He's thinking about what to pick this time. He's already powered up his skills enough, so he decides to prep for the next episode. Henry picks an item, the Key of Infannual. The system begins searching, and luckily the process succeeds. The hero's got his reward. Even though this key is an ancient relic tier, it's still super rare, only accessible to top players. The key unlocks a place where divinities exist. But to use it, Henry's got to get permission to leave campus. Getting an off-campus pass has been tougher since the Necromancer incident. That's when Henry remembered the school clubs. A little while later, he finished writing the essay. Now he could go scout for a club, but there were so many of them. He'd need to find one that matched his goals. There's a club for rune calligraphy, chess, and of course a book club. Out of all of these, not every club gets the green light for outside work, so he had to think it through. Azel also walked up to the bulletin board. Henry was shocked she hadn't joined anything yet. He's sure tons of clubs are dying to have her. Azel reminded him of who she is. But Henry knows she's Azel, and she's gotten popular lately. Since the trials, people's opinions of her have changed big time, and she's got to understand that better than anyone. Azel's got to be careful with her choice, too. Suddenly, Mitch came up to Henry and clapped him on the shoulder. The hero told him to take his hands off. He's not touchy like that. Mitch said he liked their performance in the trials. He'd also heard Henry was in charge during the recent fight with the Necromancer, which was really impressive. The hero shyly replied that it kind of just turned out that way. Mitch knew it. Henry thinks differently from everyone else. The hero reminded him he's from commoner stock, so he's got to hustle harder than most, even on weekends. Mitch said that unlike him, Henry spends his time wisely. Then the hero asked what Mitch does on weekends. Mitch casually answered, homework. Since Henry asked out of politeness, Mitch answered for the same reason. But the guy was serious. He studies and trains too. Mitch doesn't come off like your typical rich kid. He said he only started this routine recently. Henry knows Mitch was supposed to start working hard much later. What changed? Mitch said it's because of that practical class. If Azel hadn't shown up when she did, he probably wouldn't have made it. In the original storyline, Mitch and Flame were supposed to easily take down Liam. But because of Henry's interference, Flame got delayed, leaving Mitch to face Liam alone. So that's why Mitch started acting differently earlier than planned. Well, it's all for the better. At this rate, both Liam and Mitch are going to push themselves harder. Unlike Henry, this duo's progress will have a positive impact on achieving the happy ending. Mitch was surprised the hero still wasn't in a club, considering how much time had passed since they enrolled. Henry said he's just been busy. Then Mitch suggested joining his club. The hero said he'd think about it if the conditions were right. Mitch asked what Henry's ideal club would be like. Well, Henry started listing things. He doesn't want too many people, especially not frequent meetups. He wants basic insurance-covered cheese-stuffed patties for lunch, respect for personal time, and most importantly, permission for off-campus activities. Azel's stunned. She can't even imagine a club like that. And what does he mean by basic insurance? Obviously, such a club doesn't exist. Henry was just joking. And then Mitch suggested starting a club just for the hero. Henry asked if he could really start a club for special outings. Well, with Mitch's connections, it's possible. But the hero immediately asked what Mitch would gain from it. The guy said it's simple, Henry's special. The hero suddenly remembered Mitch's biggest issue, loneliness. Henry agreed to start the club and Mitch broke into a big grin. But Azel's joining them too. Since they were inseparable in the original, she can help keep Mitch mentally balanced. And Mitch is all too happy to welcome a beauty like Lady Azel. She got super annoyed and told him not to call her that. It was time to decide the club's theme. Henry had an idea. The group filled out the club registration form. Name, the Fine Dining Club. Leader, Henry with Mitch and Azel as members. Goal, explore great restaurants. Azel's not sure this'll work. If they want a stamp permitting special activities, they'll need a teacher advisor and at least 4 members. Mitch said he'd handle the members and the stamp, but finding a teacher would be tough. Henry didn't get it. Mitch can even score a special leave pass. The guy said it's just that all the teachers are trash. Then he snatched the form and headed off for the stamp. Not just anyone can approve special activities, only one of those jerks can stamp it. In the first main tower, the vice principal was handling his work. Suddenly, Mitch barged in. The guy said it had been a while, old man.